Amendment Regulations published as legal notice number 30 of 2023. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Chepkonga. Next order. Before that, honorable members, allow me to acknowledge in the public gallery Moi Forces Academy from Kamkunji, Nairobi, students, I believe. Gadera Primary School from Maragua, Murang'a. Thank you. Next order.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
Next order.
Order number 8, motion, consideration of the consolidated fund service expenditures under the financial year 2023-2024 budget estimates. Question to be put.
Order, honorable members. The motion at order number 8 was debated and closed. We now put the question. Order, honorable Haika. Take the nearest seat. The question is that this House adopts the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on its consideration of the Consolidated Fund Service Expenditures under the financial year 2023-2024 budget estimates laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 21st June 2023. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Insurance Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 18 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Insurance Act.
Next.
Order number 10, the Vocational Training Bill, Senate Bill number 3 of 2022, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide a framework for establishment of systems for the administration of training in vocational education and training within a county and for connected purposes. Order number 11, motion, consideration of a value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital marketplace supply regulations 2023.
Honorable members, before the Honorable Chepkonga moves the motion, in the House Business Committee today, we noted that there is a backlog of private members' business. Lots of motions and bills numbering in the hundreds are queuing for processing through the House. Consequent upon that, it was agreed that tomorrow, Wednesday, after question time, we will slot some 2 to 3 hours to continue with members' private business. Those of you with motions and bills, if they will be on the order paper, be available in the House to prosecute your business. We are also considering, subject to your convenience, that if we continue that, having that backlog, and I believe many of you bring motions and bills because you want them to be processed and debated and passed or rejected, as the case may be, we may consider introducing a Thursday morning private member sitting so that we can reduce the backlog of business that is piling. So let's play by the ear and the eye and see how tomorrow goes. From next week, we might call upon you to do extra time. We may even require, subject to your convenience, to extend sitting hours by an extra 2 hours to reduce this backlog. So all members with private business that is queuing at the table office and in the house, be available at short notice to prosecute your business. Thank you. You may now move your motion.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move the following motion: that the House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital marketplace supply regulations 2023, published as legal notice number 29 of 2023, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 5th July 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 67, subsection 1 of the Value-Added Tax Act number 35 of 2013, approves partly the Value-Added Tax Electronic, Internet, and Digital Marketplace Supply Regulations 2023, published as legal notice number 29 of 2023, subject to the Regulation-Making Authority publishing a corrigendum to rectify the error in the provision on offenses under Regulation 14. Mr. Speaker, the main objective and the main purpose of this regulation, the value-added tax regulations, is to provide for a legal framework to enable the government implement the tax measures necessary for the financing of its economic development agenda. Mr. Speaker, as you know, most of the businesses have migrated from the real world to the digital space. And so as a consequence of that, there are too many people who are trading now in the high cloud without landing on the land. And so, Mr. Speaker, there has been serious competition between our local businessmen and businessmen from outside this country. Our own businessmen, they pay VAT on electronic business. Unfortunately, those who are doing business from other countries and using the electronic means have not been paying value-added tax, yet they have been sending their invoices to their customers in Kenya and avoiding to pay VAT. And so they have unfairly been competing with the businesses in our country. And so the end result has been, Mr. Speaker, we have had a skewed market in favor of those who are operating from outside this country. And so the increase in the use of the digital space, Mr. Speaker, has opened the Kenyan market to the outside world, allowing non-residents to supply digital presence in the country. The import of this, Mr. Speaker, is that such suppliers, as I've just said, have not been paying VAT. And this particular regulation is to correct that particular mismatch between the local market and the digital market operating outside this country. So the necessity of the amendment, Mr. Speaker, of this VAT regulation is to ensure non-resident suppliers who account for a large percentage of the digital marketplace in Kenya must register and account for VAT on supplies made in Kenya. The committee, Mr. Speaker, scrutinized the regulations in accordance with the Constitution, the Interpretation and General Provisions Act Cap 2, the VAT Act number 35 of 2013, and the Statutory Instruments Act number 16 of 2013. The committee noted that the value-added tax regulations seeks to provide for the legal framework to enable the government to implement the tax measures for financing its economic development agenda. The regulation, Mr. Speaker, seeks to ensure that the non-residents who account for a very large part of the business in this particular sector are registered as VATable in this country. Mr. Speaker, we considered a number of parameters with regard to these regulations. And among them, Mr. Speaker, just to mention three of them, that these regulations were published on the 14th of April 2023, and therefore they comply with the Statutory Instruments Act that requires that the regulations must be forwarded to the National Assembly within 7 days of its publication. The second thing that we considered, Mr. Speaker, is the adequacy and sufficiency of public participation and consultation by the regulatory making authority, so that they must comply with Article 10 and Article 118 of the Constitution. That, Mr. Speaker, we found that indeed they did, and they supplied the necessary supporting documents to enable us recommend to this House that these regulations be therefore be approved. The third thing, Mr. Speaker, that we considered, that the regulation authority was expected to comply to ensure that all those the suppliers of this digital business in the marketplace are sufficiently and adequately consulted when levying this particular tax on these suppliers. And so, Mr. Speaker, we found that all the parameters that are required under the Statutory Instruments Act were therefore complied. It is indeed a very short regulations which contain about 5 paragraphs, Mr. Speaker. And I wish, therefore, Mr. Speaker, to beg that I move and request the Honorable Kishimu, the Vice Chair of the committee, to second this motion. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Who is seconding? Vice Chair, Honorable Kishimu. Give him the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead, Mheshimiwa.
I rise to second the motion. Mr. Speaker, the chairman has substantially covered what the committee considered in reaching the decision that is before this House. Mr. Speaker, safe to add that the committee was also satisfied that after the regulations were brought before the committee and they were published, there was no complaint from any player in the area of digital market and internet to the regulations. And that, in that case, Mr. Speaker, the committee also looked at the public participation that was also done by the regulatory making authority, and we were satisfied that all the parameters that are supposed to be considered by the Committee of Delegated Registration were met and fully satisfied. Mr. Speaker, these regulations, I must buttress that they are supposed to capture those people that have been operating within the digital market and paying nothing in the coffers of the government through the regime of value-added tax. And these regulations now seek to net them and bring them within the ambit of the same, under the same level with those people that have not been operating within the digital space and the internet. Mr. Speaker, there might not be much to say about this because the Committee on Delegated Registration's mandate is so limited into making sure that the regulations abide with the Constitution, the relevant statutes, and also public participation has been done, which I must confirm, as the chairman has said or has moved, that they were all adhered to. So, Mr. Speaker, without much ado, I seek to support and second the motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, all the honorable members. I now propose the question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital marketplace supply regulations 2023 laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 5th July 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 67 of the Value-Added Tax Act 2013, approves the value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital marketplace supply regulations 2023, published as legal notice number 29 of 2023. Before that, allow me to acknowledge the following schools in the public gallery: Don Bosco Secondary School, Manyata, Embu; Olmoran High School, Laikipia West, Laikipia; and from the Speaker's Gallery, Chesnende Girls Secondary School, Kipkelion East, Kericho. The Honorable Cherorot, the member for Kipkelion, is it East, has asked me to give him a minute to acknowledge the students. On our behalf, acknowledge all the schools. The Manyata MP is also here. So you have 2 minutes, Cherorot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this unique opportunity to welcome all the schools who have visited our gallery this afternoon. More so, Mr. Speaker, Jesinende Girls from my constituency, Kipkelion East. And I want to encourage our students, Mr. Speaker, to take that opportunity and make use of their visit to Parliament to familiarize themselves with the functions of the government. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, I want also to take this opportunity to thank you and His Excellency the Deputy President for coming to condole with us in our constituency, or in my constituency, during the grisly accident which happened at Londiani Junction. I want also to extend my gratitude to my fellow members who came also to condole with us. Mr. Speaker, I want also to thank the government for assisting, and I want also to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, also to support the motion or the approval of the digital and electronic tax, added tax, Mr. Speaker, because that will go a long way in helping our youth. Thank you so much, Mr.
Not
Speaker.
open for debate yet. Member for Manyata,
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity
2 minutes.
to welcome all the students and visitors in the gallery, especially, Honorable Speaker, my good friends from Don Bosco High School, Manyata constituency, and also a young school called Camview Secondary School that is in the Senate. And Honorable Speaker, I want to tell them that this is a house that is very keen to see the improvement of education and ensuring that our students get the best they can get. Honorable Speaker, I want to say that this is the same house that has passed the biggest budget in the education sector ever since this country was given independence in 1963. And this is, Honorable Speaker, so that we can see an improvement in what we are doing in the education sector, and also at the same time get our young people ready to face the world by having them equipped with the right, Honorable Speaker, skills to face the skills. Honorable Speaker, Don Bosco High School is one of those schools that has been catering for our very needy students, especially with a lot of equipments, because it's a missionary school, Honorable Speaker. So I want to also commend the runners of that school who are missionaries, and I would really like to say that we shall ensure we continue supporting our school system and ensure that our school system get to the best that it can get, Honorable Speaker. Welcome all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the honorable members, my screen is full. I don't know if it's full for the delegated legislation debate or it's full as usual. Okay. Bukose?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to support the amendment on regulations as brought by Honorable Chepkonga, the Chair of the Delegated Legislation, on to approve the value-added tax on electronic, internet, and digital marketplace supply, Regulations 2023, as published in the legal notice number 29 of 2023. Honorable Speaker, when you look at those regulations, I think it's only 5 paragraphs in which it needs to be done, and just to appreciate that, I think there must be some bit of fairness, Honorable Speaker, in terms of VAT. And I know this is when it comes to VAT, I know it brings a lot of challenges to some of the people because they realize that maybe the government needs to be supported not to be able to collect some money so that it fails and they have something to say in the next elections. But I want to tell them to hold their horses and allow the government to perform its duties, because every government has a responsibility to collect taxes, to be able to make sure that its employees are well taken care of, to make sure that services are provided to wananchi. Because, Honorable Speaker, when all of us as members of parliament demand that all the money for CDF has to be remitted to our various accounts so that we can be able to make sure that our projects are completed. Just as we have resumed from our short recess, Honorable Speaker, many of us are happy that many of our projects are continuing. But it's because the government was able to, whatever taxes they collected, they were able to remit all the money that each member required in his constituency to perform his CTF functions. So with those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support these regulations.
Thank you, Honorable Wandai.
Mr. Speaker, let me just make a few comments on this motion. On this motion, and I take note of the fact that it is coming shortly after the forceful passage of the Finance Bill 2023. Mr. Speaker, in principle, trying to look for areas to get additional taxes is not a bad thing, especially these areas that have previously not been exploited, especially the electronic, internet, and digital market places. It is a good thing. And in fact, how I wish this kind of thinking should have informed the drafting of the now ill-fated finance bill. Because any government that is considerate of the plight of its people must think twice before bringing on board or before effecting additional taxes on the people. It makes much more sense trying to look for areas which are previously not taxed and then tax them, as opposed to continually adding taxes, more and more taxes on an already overburdened populace. Mr. Speaker. So this should have been the best approach, rather than going to fuel and increasing the VAT twofold, actually doubling VAT on fuel. Yet you have got other areas you could have explored, like you are attempting to do through these regulations now. So that is my point. that in future, those mandarins in this government should be more considerate of the plight of the ordinary mwananchi who is suffering under the burden of taxes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am also saddened to note, of course, even as we debate this, you know, we live in a country that is governed by the rule of law. One of the cardinal principles, indeed, values in the Constitution 2010 is that every citizen, I think at Article 3, every citizen is under an obligation to respect the Constitution and, I believe, enabling laws. So, Mr. Speaker, it is a saddening moment that this House can be sitting this afternoon, of course, to discuss, among other things, new measures to raise taxes, when the government has blatantly disobeyed express court orders, which suspended the operationalization of the Finance Act 2023. It is indeed a very sad day that we could be here sitting and talking normally, as if things are normal. What message are we sending to the people? What message are we sending to the international community? What message are we sending to possible future investors in this country? If a whole government can blatantly disregard an express court order, by now I would have expected the Honorable Kimani Chungwa, my good friend, to invite the Attorney General here to explain to the Kenyan people through their representatives in this House why the government has refused to obey an express court order which has suspended the operationalization of the Finance Act 2023. As we sit here, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are being charged extra taxes when they buy fuel, a taxation which is outrightly unconstitutional and illegal based on the express court order. What example are you showing the world, you people in Kenya Kwanza? What example are you showing us?
Yes, Majority Leader. Give him the mic.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I raise on a point of order, Honorable Speaker, because I know the leader of minority is a newly crowned lawyer, and I am not one. So
Lawyers are never
crowned. He ought to know better than me.
Lawyers are never crowned, Majority Leader.
They are not crowned. They are admitted to the bar. Maybe it's because he's yet to be admitted to the bar. And I'm sure when he gets admitted to the bar and joins your ranks and that of Senior Counsel Otiende Amolo, he will be privy to the rule of sub judice, because the matters now that he's going into are matters that he very well knows, are matters before court. And they are ably represented by Senior Counsel Otiende Amolo. I'm sure the leader of minority, since he has not been admitted to the bar, he's yet to appear in court. But if he had the opportunity to appear in court, he would also know that it is not fair to mislead the country, that there is outright disregard of whatever court orders, because he knows that IPRA, that is in charge of regulating fuel prices, did give notice way before the court order was issued. And therefore, he cannot be prosecuting a new case now. And since Otiende Amolo is here and is appearing in court very soon, I'm sure they know how to transact that business in court, but we should not use this opportunity to mislead the country that indeed the Attorney General has in any way refused to adhere to any court orders. And Honorable Speaker, you know yourself, as Speaker of the National Assembly, you have set a very good example. As the President committed that this is a government that will adhere to court orders, he knows that since the suspension of the Finance Act, the government has subjected itself to the courts, and we are all waiting, just like my friends in Azimio are waiting, for the decisions of the courts. And we do that with maximum respect to our judiciary and our laws. Therefore, it's not right, Honorable Speaker, that we get into those issues that are sub judice and in court. And I'm sure the upcoming lawyer in Opio Andai has learned something.
Okay, Andai, your time was up, actually. I'll give him 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it has never been my wish to get into matters which are sub judice in this House. But, Mr. Speaker, it is clear, really. It's common knowledge that once a court makes a pronouncement on a matter, unless it is valid or otherwise overturned through a legal process, it remains an order. And therefore, the Kenya Kwanza government must comply with that court order. But again, Mr. Speaker,
your time is up.
If you tell us to go to court, and yet the court, as of late now, been captured, you see now the police have taken over the court. They're not allowing anybody to go to the courtroom. You saw the police actually physically manhandling journalists, litigants the other day in the Milimani Law Court. Something is definitely wrong with the management of this.
Martha Wangari.
Mike, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this report by the Committee of Delegated Legislation. And I support because, first of all, the anchoring law is the PFM Act. That is why, even with approval, these regulations have to find their way to this House. And Mr. Speaker, just a perusal of the short regulations is that they are basically trying to equalize and bring equity to the digital space so that if Kenyans are paying tax, why would we exempt external people and people who are international and become unfair to our own? So I support that, Mr. Speaker. And secondly, I want to support the Committee of Delegated Legislation because we have seen in the former regime, like 12th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we had a lot of mischief from the executive by using regulations as a backdoor way to regulate and make serious ramification laws through this House, Mr. Speaker. So I pray that the Delegated Legislation Committee, even if you don't have the mandate to amend regulations, you should be able to look out for the public good, that these regulations go through the public participation, and where you're not satisfied, do not shy from annulling them so that we can be able to align them not only to the Constitution, to the Statutory Instruments Act, and to all the legal framework in this country, Mr. Speaker. With those few words, I support. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Oundo.
Honorable Speaker, allow me also to stand here and support the report by the Committee on Delegated Legislation in respect to the value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital market supply regulations 2023. Honorable Speaker, in a typical environment, you try to expand the tax net, you try to expand the tax bracket so that you bring as many people, as many players into the bracket of paying taxes and avoid the situations whereby you overtax individual Kenyans doing their business. Honorable Speaker, there is a lot of traffic in the digital space, especially by the young people and even as the older ones. There is so much money being made, there's so much revenue, and there's also of employment, and hence, therefore, as you always say, whatever you earn, you must surrender to public good for the purpose also for enhancing social welfare. Honorable Speaker, the problem in this country has never been paying taxes. The problem has essentially been the way taxes are structured. Many of them we don't achieve equity, and they are burdensome to some category of people. But most importantly and most annoyingly, that the taxes of the people of Kenya never end up doing what you're supposed to do, and that's why forever you will always find resistance on the amount of taxes that we are asked to pay. As I conclude, Honorable Speaker, must also commend the Committee of Delegated Legislation, which me, I, and you, we had the opportunity to see in the 12th Parliament. And at the first point that we must always look at, has there been public participation? And public participation, Honorable Speaker, should not just be a farce, should not be a facade, must be meaningful public participation. It is hopeless to go pop up for public participation. Kenyans tell you this, and then you come to this Parliament or the floor of the House and tell you that Kenyans told you nothing. Just in the concluded process of the finance bill, Kenyans were very categorical. And even the subsequent opinion polls have been very clear that Kenyans, 71% of the Kenyans, oppose the way things are being done, the mode of imposing taxation on people of Kenya. We just hope and pray that in this particular one, there was concurrence from the people of Kenya that indeed this is a good tax. And secondly, that we hope this money, the revenue generated from these taxes, will end up with the drugs in hospitals, will end up with the classrooms in our schools, will end up with textbooks in our schools, will end up salaries being paid on time, will end up supporting different agendas or different services as provided for under Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya. For those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support, but continuously warn that we must listen to the people of Kenya. However brute force you use at one time or another, you must listen to the people of Kenya. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Other members, I'm not certain we have indicated interest on this specific agenda. I would request that if you are willing to speak to this, you kindly put on the intervention so that I'm able to tell who is speaking to what. The next one will go to the member for Tharaka, Honorable Morugara.
May I please, Madam Speaker, I wish to raise the understanding order 95 because we've listened carefully to debate in support and call upon the mover of the motion to reply so that we can move on to the next most important business. So understanding order number 95, I seek to you call upon the mover to reply.
Other members? Honorable Murugara has risen in his position so that the mover be called to reply under Standing Order 95. Order members. Order members. I had requested that you indicate through. Okay. Hold on. Honorable members, let me give member for Seme, because I can see him protesting in his position. Before I put the question, there are not as many members who has indicated interest. Then I will, if we need to, we will put the question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Madam Speaker, this is a good idea. This regulation is a good idea, which has come because e-business is actually become the in thing and international, which means a lot of trade is being done through the e-media. And this is worldwide, which means even people outside the country are also doing business inside the country. And it's a big business. And if you look at these regulations, Regulation 3 actually lists all the areas that are concerned: downloadable digital content, subscription-based media, over-the-top services, software programs, electronic data management, music content, search engines, and so on. So that's a big area. However, Madam Speaker, there's one thing we have to look at as we do this. Remember, in the disputed finance bill, we were actually taxing the digital content, and this we really didn't like it because it was targeting a lot of young people. So as much as support this, it may be important to find in the regulations how we can protect our young people so that those who are making just small monies for themselves are not that taxed. And actually it is this in the such regulations that this can be done. Otherwise, it's something that we need, because as we move forward and we go into digital trade, it is worldwide. Big businesses from outside the country will actually do business here without paying taxes. So with that, Madam Speaker, if we make sure that later on we look at the regulation to protect our young people, who we are protecting by insisting we remove the taxation of a digital content, although it was reduced from 20% to 5%, that is the only thing I would have with it. Otherwise, I support Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member. Member for Seme. Member for Emuhaya.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I think I arise to support this. One, let me begin by congratulating the Committee on Delegated Business because it's bringing now order into this sector of dealing with the regulations so that all of them go through the committee before they are actualized by those who made them, because we had a situation whereby authorities or ministers were making laws without those laws going through Parliament. Number two, let me support this by indicating that finally, in terms of business, we are headed towards e-business and e-commerce. And actually every other business, even those that are still operating on the ground, if I may use the words of the mover, will sooner or later be in the cloud. And therefore, unless we go to the space of the cloud to actually ask those who are trading their big money, big businesses, to actually pay VAT and other taxes, then we shall squeeze or shrink our tax net. And in a country like ours, which we are relied on external borrowing, and which we now want to reduce so that we depend on our own taxes and depend on our own selves, so that we don't expand borrowing from outside, this becomes a very good platform, Honorable Speaker, to expand the tax net and bring into bear those who are not paying these taxes and are operating on the e-market. And then lastly, Honorable Speaker, is the bit of competition that most of our traders still remain on the ground, while big businesses are operating on the e-platform and cloud, and therefore they are enjoying very favorable conditions of trade, while our own are not enjoying this so unfavorable trade conditions between our own traders and those that are operating on the cloud. As for digital content, I don't think this matter touches on digital content. It is really dealing, Honorable Speaker, with the businesses themselves and digital content, which we had discussed earlier in the. For without much ado, Honorable Speaker, I want to support.
Thank you. Member for Starehe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute and support this motion. First and foremost, I want to commend the mover of this motion for showing the government that they can be more creative in matters raising revenue, rather than overburdening Kenyans with taxes, or rather borrowing. The other ways that they can exploit and get revenue to run the affairs of the government. I think it's a move in the right direction, where we're talking about equity in the market, in the online marketing space. I think this is a kind of motion that we should embrace so that we can protect our very infant creative industry by making sure we have a level playing field, by introducing VAT on content or on businesses that are conducted by non-residents of Kenya. We protect our businesses, we protect our content creators, and I think if we get more proactive motions like this, we can be able to take this country further. Instead of overburdening Kenyans with taxes, we should look for creative ways in how we can incubate our young economy, bring down the cost of living, and bring equity in the market space so that our people are able to do business and raise money to run their affairs. For the youth, this is, I think, is a move in the right direction, because most of the youths now are into online businesses, and their biggest competitors have always been these non-residents who actually don't pay taxes to this country, making their products cheaper, even online, making their content even cheaper, and by the fact that their countries have very, very robust digital space technologies that they have embraced, they compete unfairly with our people. So I think I rise to support this motion, and I urge the Kenya Kwanza government to continue bringing more creative ideas rather than thinking about borrowing and taxing our people. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I submit.
Thank you. The Leader of Majority.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And let me also rise to support the committee's report on the digital marketplace regulations on VAT. And Honorable Speaker, as has been indicated by the mover and numerous other members who have contributed, it is indeed true that VAT has been levied on Kenyans who are supplying services in the digital marketplace, but foreigners who are supplying similar services are not paying VAT on those services, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, the principal objective of these regulations is to ensure that even foreigners who are supplying services in this country, Honorable Speaker, are also paying taxes in this country. Because it's not fair that we levy VAT in the digital marketplace to our own people when they supply services that are similar to those being supplied by foreigners, but the foreigners supply services and end up not paying tax. Honorable Speaker, these regulations are in line with the commitment that the Kenya Kwanza government made to the people of Kenya, that we shall have tax policies and tax measures that will ensure there is equity, there is fairness, and there is certainty in the manner tax administration is done. And indeed, Honorable Speaker, these regulations now go to ensure that we do exactly as we promised, that we create equity, that a Kenyan who is supplying goods and services in the digital marketplace pays similar tax as a foreigner who is supplying the same services, Honorable Speaker, because the system that has persisted before has been one that is not creating equity between foreigners and Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, it is not fair since a Kenyan cannot supply services in the US or even in the UK, in Europe, in the Middle East without paying taxes. If anything, Honorable Speaker and members of Parliament are fortunate because they travel quite a while, for quite often, not a while, quite often, Honorable Speaker, to these countries in the West. And they know whatever little thing you do, even when you shop online, when you get a service delivered to you, whether it's Uber, whether it is something to do with other services, even in the hotels where you are working and you are doing online, the first thing you do is that there's a tax element to it, and that tax is collected upfront, whether you pay with your local card or your international cards, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, there was no equity before, and now we are creating that equity by ensuring that just as you pay taxes when you access services from those countries outside of our own borders, Honorable Speaker, even foreigners who will now supply services here will pay taxes to the Kenyan Revenue Services, Honorable Speaker, or to KRA in terms of VAT. Two, Honorable Speaker, is about fairness. And it is one of the principles of taxation that a tax administration system must also create fairness, and therefore a system that was not unfair, these regulations now are creating that fairness. And there is also certainty, Honorable Speaker. Whether you are in this country, whether you are outside, foreigners will be able to know what is our tax regime, VAT rates. They will be able to know for what services are you liable to pay VAT, and therefore they also be complying with our own tax laws as they comply with tax laws in their own countries. Because, Honorable Speaker, it's also interesting that many of these companies and corporations that offer digital marketplace services are paying taxes and paying very heavy taxes back in their home countries, including excise duty, Honorable Speaker. But when they come here, they don't even pay that VAT. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, this will indeed, in a great way, not just aid in creating fairness, equity, and certainty in the tax administration process, but also ensure, Honorable Speaker, that the Kenyan government is able to tap into new sources of revenue, Honorable Speaker. And that, again, is a commitment that we made, and the President has made that commitment that will be innovative in creating new tax measures, Honorable Speaker, that will ensure we do not overburden Kenyans, Honorable Speaker, with huge taxes. And I am happy that now even those of us in the minority now are appreciating the need to collect more taxes so that we do not overburden our people with a huge debt burden, Honorable Speaker. And this can only happen by innovative ways of creating or widening the tax base. And I remember during the Finance Act debate, Finance Bill debate, Honorable Speaker, many people challenged government, be innovative, create new ways of...
30 seconds, wind up, Leader of Majority.
Honorable Speaker, I was saying to be innovative, to tap into new ways, Honorable Speaker. And when we spoke about bottom-up transformation agenda, Honorable Speaker, and we said we'll be able to expand the tax base, this is part of that expansion of our tax base to be able to tap into new sources of revenue to finance government operations, Honorable Speaker. And with those many remarks, I beg to support.
Honorable Justice Kemei, member for Sigowet Soin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity you've given me so that I can also add my voice on this report. First and foremost, Madam Speaker, I want to support the report that has been brought to the House by Honorable Chepkonga. My colleagues have talked about equity, fairness, and other principles or values, Madam Speaker. I wish just to point out that this particular report actually levels the playing field in terms of trade. A large volume of trade at the moment, Madam Speaker, is transacted through the digital platform. That means if this report had not been brought to Parliament, Madam Speaker, we would have continued losing a lot of money, which will go a long way in providing services to our people and in terms of development. So, Madam Speaker, without much ado, I want to support and thank the committee for bringing the report to Parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order members, today we have quite a number of schools. Allow me to recognize the following in the public gallery. We have Nun Kopir Girls, Kajiado East, Kajiado County. We have Narumoru Boys in Kieni, from Kieni constituency, Nyeri County. We have Ola City Day Primary School from Narok East, Narok County. And we also have Umoja Day Secondary School, Laikipia West, Laikipia County. In the Speaker's Gallery, we have Kisingo Secondary School from Kibwezi West constituency, Makueni County. And we have Koibeyot Secondary School, Bomet East constituency, Bomet County. On behalf of the House and the Speaker, I welcome you to observe the proceedings of the House. On that point, I have accepted to give to Honorable Mwengi Mutuse from Kibwezi West. You will not only welcome them on your behalf, but on the behalf of the other members. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to welcome all the schools and the students who are in our public gallery together with their teachers to the House of Parliament, the National Assembly, to request them to be keen and to listen to the proceedings so that they may learn and they may also get the necessary exposure that will help them in their studies and also in their future life. Particularly, Madam Speaker, to welcome Kisingo Secondary School, that is from my constituency, Kibwezi West, just near our constituency headquarters. I know is an upcoming school performing very well, and to inform them that through the national government CDF, this year we'll be buying them a bus so that next year they do not have to use public transport to come to Parliament. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
I will indulge the member for Narok 2 minutes as we close on that one.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I also want to welcome Ola City Primary School to this House. And Madam Speaker, plus the other schools who have come here on benchmarking. Madam Speaker, as a member of the Education Committee, I'm so privileged to have our children here because I know, Madam Speaker, they learn a lot. Ola City Primary School is doing very well, and Madam Speaker, I know this one will go in record that they've been here, and this will add to their performance. So I want to encourage them to work hard, because that is the way to go. Education is an equalizer. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, member for Narok. Back to our motion. The next speaker would be the member for Kathiani.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. I also rise to support this report by the committee, and I also happen to be a member of that committee. Madam Speaker, modern times call for modern solutions. And it's important to understand basically what is this electronic internet digital marketplace supplies. And Regulation 3 is very clear and has spelled out each and every one of those items that fall within that category. But I'd like to point out there's a lot of business that goes on in that space, even educational issues, things to do with music and games, movies, even transport. I mean, things like those platforms for transport like Uber, small cabs, and the rest. They all fall within that digital market space. But, Madam Speaker, as some of our speakers have said before, the foreign multinationals have not been paying VAT on trading in Kenya and doing their business here. But when we trade with them, we are supposed to be able to pay VAT. So basically what this thing has done is that it has actually leveled the playing field. We are able to, we pay taxes to them, they also pay taxes to us. Madam Speaker, the issue of double standards is one of those things that we must always try and get rid of in our deliberations and in all our actions. I saw recently an example of double standards when Kenya Kwanza have said that you cannot do demonstrations, but then the members of Kenya Kwanza are allowed to do demonstrations. In fact, even some of the members walking around wielding weapons. And nobody talks about it, nobody takes action against them. But when it comes to members of Azimio, any small attempt to even meet 2-3 people, it is faced with serious, serious attacks. So, Madam Speaker, just like the way we are dealing with these regulations, let us ensure that there is a level playing field in everything. Madam Speaker, again, it is also a very good concept because we are being creative in collection of taxes. We are being creative because we've looked at other ways. How else can we collect money? Instead of overburdening that Kenyan who has already been so hard hit by the cost of living. So we've gone out and come up with a regulation that is going to give us money from multinationals. So it's not coming from the local Kenyans. So that's a very good concept. And so we must also be creative how we handle our situation as a country. Even issues of demonstrations, how do we handle them? We cannot be barbaric, we cannot be primitive and be fighting and clobbering Kenyans because of demonstrations. Let us be creative when we are looking for money. Let us be creative also when we are handling Kenyans. So let's say no further bloodshed. Madam Speaker, I support.
Order, members. As I had indicated, on this motion, if you're willing to contribute to this one, you put on the intervention. I only have 2 members pending, and then we will call the mover to reply if there is no other interest. Member for Kwanza, Honorable Ferdinand Wanyoni.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for this committee for bringing up this because it appears you are doing business here without collecting taxes, which actually is not the right thing to do. Therefore, I think we support this proposal because, one, people are operating outside the regulations, and therefore, I think that's how we have been losing the income, we have been losing the value for money. And I want to agree with my friend here. We're now being creative. It's a way of looking for money. Of course, this is not punitive. One should not take this as a punitive move, but a way of looking for money outside the box. And I think it's also that the foreigners were actually bringing in some goods here without being taxed. And that, again, is an issue of tax collection. And therefore, I think, Madam Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank the committee and ask them to go to cast the net wider so they can be able to get as many operations coming outside and even within to pay some taxes for whatever business they are doing in the country. And therefore, I want to take this opportunity to thank the committee and I support.
Thank you. Member for Sirisia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me also a chance to contribute on this very important motion. Honorable Speaker, many of us in this country, Madam Speaker, have not been paying tax the way we can see. Madam Speaker, this is the only way to go. And I believe that our country is now coming up, and the digital space Madam Speaker, is going to help this country at least to collect enough revenue from everywhere, every corner, so that we will not be borrowing much from outside. Madam Speaker, this regulation is good because it is trying to create space for so many things. Even internet has been helping in so many aspects. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that taxes in every these developed countries, Madam Speaker, taxes is a must to every citizen. And in this country, Madam Speaker, many people, many business people have been evading to pay tax. But with this online, the digital space that we are getting, I'm sure, Madam Speaker, that nobody will evade tax in this country. So, Madam Speaker, I support. Thank you very much.
Other members, I see there is no more interest on this motion. On this specific motion, I will therefore call the mover to reply.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank all members who have ably contributed to this motion. Madam Speaker, the members have been very relevant in their contribution. However, Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a few clarifications. One, these regulations do not touch on the finance bill that is pending in the High Court. Madam Speaker, as you know, this government is a law-abiding government. We cannot bring regulations or VAT increase through the back door. We are a law-abiding country, and we will also like the other people on the other side to be also law-abiding citizens. Madam Speaker, this particular regulation, as many members have just pointed out, will create equity in the market, will create fairness, and will create a level playing ground for all the players in the digital world. And so, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank all the members who have contributed, and I therefore reply.
Order, members. We have the requisite numbers. I therefore put the question that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital marketplace supply regulations 2023, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 5th July 2023, and pursuant to the provisions of Section 67 of the Value-Added Tax 2013, approves that the value-added tax, electronic, internet, and digital market supply Place Supply Regulations 2023, published as legal notice number 29 of 2023. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 12, the Food and Feed Safety Control Coordination Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21 of 2023, second reading.
Leader of Majority.
Honorable Speaker, I beg your indulgence on that of the House, Honorable Speaker, to skip order number 12, the Food and Feed Safety Control Coordination Bill, National Assembly Bill number 21 of 2023, the second reading of this bill, Honorable Speaker, because the committee, this bill, Honorable Speaker, is before two committees, the Committee of Health, and the Chair Health Committee was here, actually, was supposed to do this, and the Committee on Agriculture, and they are still considering the report. Being a joint committee, they were not able to finish during the recess. But the Chair Health has indicated to me that they are meeting this week to try and finalize their report, and hopefully we'll be able to continue the second reading once they table their report, Honorable Speaker. And therefore beg that you do indulge us.
Thank you. That order is therefore stood down. Next order.
Order number 13, the National Rating Bill, National Assembly Bill number 55 of 2022, second reading.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the National Rating Bill, National Assembly Bill number 55 of 2022 be now read a second time. Honorable Speaker, Article 209(5) of the Constitution confers on Parliament the powers to regulate the exercise of fiscal responsibilities by county governments, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, you know, county governments, by dint of the Constitution, have powers to impose levies and taxes on the people. But Parliament is also given powers under Article 209(5) of the same Constitution to regulate the exercise of these fiscal responsibilities by our county governments to ensure, one, that we do not, or rather our county governments do not impose taxes and levies that undermine the greater national good. And two, there is uniformity, certainty, and fairness in the taxes that are levied and rates that are levied across the country, Honorable Speaker, so that we do not have one county levying certain rates and taxes that are so obnoxious as compared to those of other counties, and therefore make even the cost of doing business in certain counties more expensive than others. Honorable Speaker, this is the reason and the object of this bill, which seeks to provide for enhancement, for certainty, for uniformity and fairness in levying of property rates by our county governments, while providing a secure source of income or revenue for many of our county governments that are suffering from very low own source revenue. Honorable Speaker, members will appreciate, and indeed the country appreciates, that our county governments under Schedule 4 of the Constitution are charged with numerous functions and responsibilities. And Kenyans in our constituencies are waiting for all our county governments to offer them goods and services. And many of the people who expect goods and services, Honorable Speaker, are property owners and rateable properties, Honorable Speaker. But some of these properties, even in major cities like Nairobi, you will find a lot of non-uniformity and fairness in the manner in which people are paying rates. For instance, in Embakasi East constituency, where the Honorable Babu Owino comes from and represents the people, Honorable Speaker, you will find somebody with 5 acres in Embakasi East, because that's one of the constituencies within Nairobi where there are still large landowners. But the amount of rates that they are paying to the Nairobi city government is negligible compared to what somebody is paying for in Lavington on half an acre, or in Kilimani on quarter of an acre, Honorable Speaker. And you also find, Honorable Speaker, in this country we have what are called not slum landlords, but slum billionaires. You will find someone in Mukuru kwa Jenga or Mukuru kwa Ruben who owns 10 acres of Mabati structures and making probably 10 to 12 million shillings from very vulnerable and poor people who he does not even offer any sanitation facilities for. And that person, the rates you find them paying, because probably even the land is not adjudicated, is negligible. Yet a landlord who is in Kilimani on a block of flats sitting on 1/8 of an acre is paying way much higher than even what they are able to collect in terms of rental income and income to themselves. And therefore, it creates a situation where there is no uniformity, there is no fairness, and this bill therefore seeks to create that uniformity and fairness in levying of property taxes by county governments. Honorable Speaker, the bill also seeks to consolidate the valuation for Rating Act Cap 266 and the Rating Act Cap 267 into one, which will now be referred as the National Rating Act. And as I said, providing a comprehensive and uniform legislative framework that will regulate how all our county governments across the country levy rates and other levies that they may be levying to property owners. The bill, Honorable Speaker, also seeks to synchronize the terms and definitions in line with current definitions on valuation of rateable property, current practice, Honorable Speaker, because these two acts, the Valuation for Rating Act, Cap 266 and Cap 267 of the Rating Act, refer to definitions and things that were done back then. But as with all other professions, even in the valuation profession, those of us who have studied land economics and those who are valuers know that there are new terms and definitions in the industry, and therefore this bill seeks also to align to that. It also seeks to identify the mechanisms on how our county governments shall undertake valuation for rating and imposition of rates on rateable property to reflect the powers, as I said, that were intended under Article 209(3)(a) for counties to impose property taxes or property rates, adhering to Article 10 of the Constitution on Values and Principles of Governance, Article 232 of the Constitution to ensure there is conformity to the values and principles of public service, and of course to Article 232 to conform to the principles of public finance. Honorable Speaker, this bill will also provide for the establishment of the National Rating Tribunal that will be responsible for resolution of disputes relating to property rating. Honorable Speaker, today, if the county government of Nairobi or the city government of Nairobi imposed rates on the Honorable Robert Mbui, who I know owns quite a number of properties in Embakasi South, and the Honorable Mbui felt that they were being unfair, he has no recourse. And therefore, we are creating a recourse so that the Honorable Robert Mbui, if he feels his investments in Kathiani are rated better than those in Embakasi South, then he has somewhere a tribunal that he can walk to and appeal to. Therefore, we will create that mechanism for him through this bill. We also enhance the use of appropriate technology in undertaking valuation for rating and rating-related purposes, Honorable Speaker. You know, in the past, you had to walk the miles to be able to identify where particular land parcels are. Today, with modern technology and with geo-positioning technology, we can be able to use geo-positioning technology to be able to identify exactly where a piece of land is. As I was saying, Honorable Speaker, you will find billionaires who own land in our slum areas. But because the title reads Mukuru kwa Jenga or Mukuru kwa Ruben, and maybe that Mukuru kwa Ruben is the title that, or the description of the area that is reading that. But you find with time, South B Estate or Plainsview has now grown into some of those formerly slum areas. And therefore, the value of land in that area is not as accurate as it was 10 years ago, Honorable Speaker. But with modern technology, you'll be able to geoposition that particular land reference number and know exactly where is this land. You can even be able to estimate the actual size of any size of land. And there's technology today.
Honorable Babu Owino, this is not Embakasi. You do not just cross the floor like that.
Thank you. You know, Honorable Babu Owino might be imagining he's in Jacaranda grounds. But we must forgive him because he was just released the other day from police cells. Honorable Speaker, I was saying with modern technology, it is possible to even be able to now, with geopositioning, estimate, not actually estimate, get the actual size of land without land values having to go and using very rudimental technology to value land. And therefore, this bill now also creates that opportunity for us to be able to use modern technology in undertaking valuations, because technology also enhances fairness and certainty. And therefore, unlike in the past where you have to talk, what in Kenyan parlance they say is kuongea na chai ama kitu kidogo, to value us, to be able to value land for you appropriately. Now you will not need to do that. With modern technology, you can be able to know this value, the value of land in this particular area, the size is this much, and similar properties around that area are paying whatever amount they are paying, and therefore have a system that is fair. Honorable Speaker, this bill also has identified the role of counties for the implementation of the objects of the Act, which shall include ensuring, as I said, there is fair and equal treatment to all rateable owners, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is not fair that there are people in this country, and I'll give you the case example, Honorable Speaker, of Kahawa Wendani, Kahawa Sukari. You will find many people who, including members of parliament, who live in Kahawa Wendani and Kahawa Sukari, and they are paying rates to the county government of Kiambu and some to the county government of Nairobi. But across the river, you will find people who own ranches within the city, but they don't pay rates either to the county government of Nairobi or the county government of Kiambu. And Honorable Speaker, we must ensure that there is fairness. It is not fair that somebody in Kahawa Sukari or Kahawa Wendani is paying rates, but another person, probably because of positions they have occupied over the years, they don't pay rates. Honorable Speaker, now with this kind of bill, there will be fairness. The county government of Nairobi will be able to levy rates. I know the member for Embakasi West, Honorable Mwenje, is getting itchy when I speak about these things. But it's only fair that every taxpayer pays their due taxes, even on land. Whether you own a ranch within the city, whether you own an eighth of an acre like myself, whether you own no land like the member from Kisii County or the Honorable Nyikal owns a lot of land in Karen, so he cannot be raising his hand for me to point to him. I meant the Honorable Elvis, who does not own land in Nairobi, but he owns land, huge chunks in Kisii. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, there will be fairness with this new bill. We also ensure, Honorable Speaker, that the burden of property rating is shared fairly amongst the ratepayers. And that's what I was driving to, that if you have more land, you pay more. If you have less land, you pay less. And therefore, you share the burden, Honorable Speaker. Because the only reason why levies and rates and taxes are levied on people is because you are the people, if you are property owners, you are the people enjoying the services that will be offered by the county governments. Kenyans are very quick at demanding services and supply of goods and services in their neighborhoods. And you've seen, Honorable Speaker, in the recent past, the upcoming of gated communities. All these gated communities are coming up, and the people who sell what they call, in my local language, buroti maguta maguta. And those who understand the language know what buroti maguta maguta is. Those people who sell serviced plots, Honorable Speaker, will market those plots as service plots. And all they do is grade a Maram Road, put 5 poles of solar lighting, no provision of sewer services, no, they will probably bring in one line of, and put one tap to show you that there is clean drinking water. But they never tell you when you build and develop that property, with time, even if they had a borehole on that property, Honorable Speaker, that borehole will not be very healthy to use or very secure to use for drinking water, because you are sinking septic pits, and whatever comes from your sewer system is percolating into the water that you are then drinking with those gated communities. Therefore, it's only fair, Honorable Speaker, that there are levied rates that will ensure that county governments are able to provide them with proper sewerage. They're able to bring them adequate water to use in those gated communities, Honorable Speaker. And because this is going out even beyond Nairobi and our cities, even in our rural areas, Honorable Speaker, today if you go to Kikuyu, what was otherwise known as Deya Ngobe, because it was all grazing land in the past, today there are Nairobi Ndogos, there are huge, very modern estates being built there, but requisite services are not coming. And we must ensure that our county governments have adequate revenues to be able to provide those all services, whether it is roads whether it is water, whether it is sewer systems, street lighting, so that, Honorable Speaker, again, our people do not fall prey to the vendors of land that who market land as serviced, but it is not serviced. It's just one tap that is put there to show people that there is water. Only when you build and you start living there, you realize it's only one line of water that came that could not supply beyond 1,000 liters a day, Honorable Speaker. This bill, Honorable Speaker, also takes cognizance of the needs of the county and promotes imposition of rates to boost socio and economic development. Those are the issues I'm speaking to conduct effective public participation and public awareness that now counties, Honorable Speaker, and this, Honorable Speaker, speaks to an incident I have seen in my own county in Kiambu, that without proper public participation, Honorable Speaker, and public awareness, county governments embark on systems of changing what rates they are levying to property owners, Honorable Speaker. And the lack of public awareness and public participation means that even our members of county assemblies appear before their county assemblies and pass whatever legislative proposals are put before them without paying regard to the impact of those propositions on landowners, Honorable Speaker. I have seen in my own county in Kiambu, land that is agricultural and freehold, that previously was not rateable. The county assembly in one finance bill, I think in 2017 or 2018, imposed rates even on agricultural land. Honorable Speaker, you can imagine a farmer in Ondire, or a farmer in my village where I come from, or a farmer in Gekambura, or a farmer in Kerwa, or a farmer in some village in Karachuonyo. Should the county government in Karachuonyo impose such rates as those that were done in Kiambu, is now required to pay rates in terms of hundreds of thousands for 2 acres, at times to an extent where they are required to pay rates higher than what they are able to produce on that particular farm. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, if you do not have a legislative framework that will ensure that there is fairness, there is certainty, so that whether you are in Kikuyu or Kabete or even Uthiru here, Honorable Speaker, and you are farming, you cannot be levied rates at the same rate as somebody who has developed his land or subdivided his land and has built blocks of apartments, and you are required to pay the same rates. That person who is generating more revenue or more income from rental income should be able to pay more rates than a farmer who is producing food, so that we also don't discourage our farmers. Honorable Speaker, if you go to Netherlands, and I'm sure, Honorable Speaker, the time I had a trip with you to The Hague, way back in 2015 or 2016, you remember as we landed early in the morning in Netherlands, right outside the airport, farmers are growing wheat. And you find the same in very many other capitals around this country, because there is deliberate policy by government to ensure that you encourage even urban farming. And people who are farming even near cities are able to have tax regimes and tax administration policies that encourage them to get into farming, so that we don't only encourage people to get into what is the creation of concrete jungles today, because rental income will generate more money, but all those people have no food, Honorable Speaker. Today we are crying about the cost of food, but we are crying because of over the cost of food. Kitengela here, Honorable Speaker, parts of Kajiado, parts of the lower Machakos, Honorable Speaker, are areas where people would be growing food if we encourage them. Those who have freehold land, those who can farm. The county government of Machakos, of Kajiado, of Kiambu, encourage farmers, someone holding an acre and can grow crops, food crops, encourage them to do that. And therefore, must be that, not discrimination, what do you call it? Disparity between those who are in income generating activity and those who are growing food, so that we encourage farmers. Honorable Speaker, this bill will also provide for a criteria for the determination of categories of, for instance, rateable properties for purposes of levying of different rates, and those that will be exempt rateable property uses. And Honorable Speaker, that's what I was speaking to. For instance, agricultural land, you could county governments could classify certain areas where there is agricultural land as exempt from paying property rates because we want to encourage agriculture and food production. A county government could also determine, for instance, in Thika, that industries are what they want to encourage, and therefore create lower rates for industries and levy more for those who want to do housing and or even grow food crops. Those in Kisumu could decide that if you are creating landing bays around the lake, then you will enjoy lower property rates so that you encourage investors to come and invest in our counties. Honorable Speaker, we also, through this bill, ensure that there is prudent and responsible use of funds collected for purposes of this Act to enhance service delivery in our counties. So that, Honorable Speaker, there is also a clear, transparent, and accountable system in our county governments to ensure that whatever rates counties are collecting. Today, Honorable Speaker, I had instance about 3 or 4 months ago, I wanted to get a loan from somewhere. And I needed a rates clearance certificate. When you walk into the county government of Kiambu offices, depending on which officer you find which day and their moods, or what you are to offer them, you get different valuations. Honorable Speaker, this must be a thing of the past. Any Kenyan should be able to know, even online, how much rates are your property subject to, so that you know at the beginning of the year, my 1 acre property in Karachuonyo, I will pay 10,000 shillings. And therefore, it will not be at the whims of a revenue officer down in the county government, because this is what is happening in all our counties. And now speaking about Kiambu, I'm only making reference to Kiambu because that's where I come from. Even in Nairobi County, and I'm a property owner in Nairobi County also, so I know. You will get various amounts depending on who, which day, and the mood they are in, and whether you look like someone they could talk to. So they give you a bill depending on who you are and how you approach them. So we want that to be a thing of the past so that Kenyans transparently are able to know, even if I am able to, through geopositioning, tag onto a land reference number in Lodwar town, I should be able to know online how much rates will I pay. So that even banks, when they are advancing credit to members of the public, they are even able to know the approximate value based on the rates that are being paid. Because today, Honorable Speaker, again, many banks are holding titles and security that are worthless because people colluded with valuers, they colluded with government officers, banks got collateral for land that is basically valueless. But with a proper system like this that will be created under this Rating Act, Honorable Speaker, we'll be able to put some of these things behind us. Honorable Speaker, I did speak about the need for effective public participation and public awareness to ensure that members of the public, again, Honorable Speaker, know. So that even as I buy land in Narok County to grow wheat, I should know what are the rates that the county government of Narok will levy on that land and be able to do my arithmetics and be able to determine whether I'll make money from the wheat growing. If I want to develop a block of flats in Kitengela or in Mlolongo, I'll be able to know what are the rates that are chargeable, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, we also, in a way, encourage foreign direct investments into our counties, both from foreign and domestic investors, Honorable Speaker. And this is something that we must continuously encourage people to invest across the country. And for that to happen, Honorable Speaker, there must be certainty on what is rateable, what is not rateable, what rates people are going to pay. Honorable Speaker, lastly, this bill proposes to introduce 4 forms of rating. This will be the annual rent of value rate, where land is rated annually, and you know with certainty this is how much you pay annually. There is an area rate, as I was saying, even now with global positioning and modern technology, You should be able to determine on what size of land you pay what amount, whether it's per square meter or per hectare or per square foot. Then an improved site value rate and a site value rate in combination with an improvement rate. Because, Honorable Speaker, it's also not fair. There are properties even within CBD that are not developed, and therefore there is no improvement on that land. But you find on a property that has a 20-story building where someone is collecting about $500 million shillings in rental income, they are paying an equivalent rate with that person who is using his land within the CBD as a parking lot, or giving that land to our market traders to use for the Maasai market on Tuesdays and the day they were doing. So there must be that distinction on the area, whether land is improved, whether it is not improved. And I was speaking, Honorable Speaker, even in the rural constituencies and rural areas and rural counties, even on land that is agricultural and non-agricultural land. And I want to believe, Honorable Speaker, as we come to the third reading, the Committee of Lands will consider bringing amendments to make sure that there's also a clear distinction between agricultural land. And, Honorable Speaker, I am very particular on agriculture, and I have said this deliberately, Honorable Speaker, in moving this bill, because one of the greatest risks that we face in this country today is that of food insecurity. The housing agenda, Honorable Speaker, as vilified as it was being vilified, Honorable Speaker, in a way addresses the question of food insecurity also. Because we are fragmenting our land, Honorable Speaker. Before, some years back, the lowest fragmentation was 50 by 100, which is an eighth of an acre. Today, Honorable Speaker, I have seen in my own county fractions of 20 by 80. And they have titles, Honorable Speaker. They are 40 by 80s. Those so-called gated estates, they are telling people, we are selling you quarter an acre, but they are selling you a 40 by 80, some 70 by 30. In Embakasi, they will tell you they are all 33 by 66. And, Honorable Speaker, those are the issues we are speaking to, that we must have those distinctions, Honorable Speaker, so that when we come to the third reading, we are able to ensure there is actual fairness. Because the more we fragment our land, the more we expose ourselves to food insecurity. If we are able to safeguard our land from further fragmentation and secure more of our land for use for agricultural purposes, encourage our farmers by giving them lower property rates on agricultural land, we encourage even more of our young people to get into food production and agriculture and secure food security, but not this business that we are now in of what I call buroti maguta maguta, where every free and open space in this country today now is up for fragmentation and subdivision for housing estates that are even not planned and defined. Honorable Speaker, therefore, this bill will be able to address some of those things. The bill, Honorable Speaker, has also provided for the appointment and powers of a valuer to undertake preparation of valuation roles, and also introduce the office of a chief government valuer with respect to standardization and harmonization on preparation and implementation of the valuation roles across the counties. Because, Honorable Speaker, as I said, we leave it to the whims of revenue officers in our counties to determine what rates to levy on property owners. Honorable Speaker, that becomes a very good avenue for corruption. That's why I was saying in my own county, depending on which officer you find on which day, you will get a different figure. And they all get those figures from the system, funny enough. I don't know what they do to the system. Some will indicate for you on a piece of paper. Some will generate in a system. I don't know how they're able to change those systems. So we want a system where we have a chief government valuer who will be able to rationalize, so that based on the value of land in different parts of the country, the chief government valuer now will be able to standardize and harmonize the valuation roles across the counties, so that one county doesn't overtax people as opposed to another, and therefore make some of our counties very unfavorable or unattractive for investments, whether by local or foreign investors. Lastly, Honorable Speaker, Part 4 of this bill contains provisions on the valuation for rating, declaration of rateable areas, and methods used for valuation, and proposes to introduce a valuation cycle of 5 years, with provision that the county assemblies can extend the period for a maximum of 2 years. The bill further provides guidance on the preparation and contents of valuation rolls and supplementary valuation rolls, together with alterations, publication, and objections thereof, and exceptions provided. Honorable Speaker, it's important that whatever valuation rolls we come up with in our counties, every 5 years we're able to review them. And the county assemblies can extend those valuation rolls or whatever they are using for the rateable areas for a maximum of 2 years. So that, again, all our county governments appraise themselves with the current developments. And you see, Honorable Speaker, in many of our rural areas, with a massive investment put in the development of infrastructure, whether it is rail or road infrastructure, Honorable Speaker, you find areas that in about 5 years ago were not accessible by road or by rail, today or in another 5 years are accessible. And therefore, the value of land keeps fluctuating and changes. There are other happenings that could also devalue land, although very rare, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, if you go for a long time without being able to review, then county governments will lose the opportunity to be able to collect rates from their areas. Therefore, we want to ensure that every 5 years, our county governments are able to review the rateable properties and the rates that they are charging, and the areas where the rateable areas and the methods that they use for valuation, so that they keep appraising their sources of revenue, Honorable Speaker, to be able to generate more revenue. And I was saying, Honorable Speaker, in the earlier debate on the VAT on market digital place, we did commit as a Kenya Kwanza government, right from the campaign to when His Excellency the President took over as the leader of this nation last year, that this government will be deliberate and intentional in ensuring that we create new avenues of raising revenue or revenue-raising measures, not just what we did in the digital marketplace, VAT, and other taxes, but even in this Rateable Ratings Act, we are seeking to create new avenues for our county governments across the country, even Marsabit County, where my sister, Honorable Naomi Wako, comes from. And I know she is working very hard, hopefully, to be the next governor for that county. Should that happen, Honorable Speaker, we want to ensure that her and other members of parliament here who intend to run for governor positions have very good sources of revenue. For instance, Nandi County, where the Honorable Meli comes from, is one area, and I mentioned the Honorable Meli deliberately because I also know he intends to run for governor. But he must be here to ensure that his own county in Nandi, the tea estates there, the levying of property taxes is fair, and is able to collect adequate rates on land in Nandi County to ensure that when he becomes governor, or Naomi Wako is governor for Marsabit, or someone else is governor for Busia, you have sources of revenue that you will not become another crybaby to be asking for money from the center. Because all our governors have huge opportunities. And I must take this opportunity, Honorable Speaker, to thank governors. Like the governor for Kirinyaga. I think I also saw the governor for Tharaka Nithi, governor for Murang'a, governors who have embarked on shoring up their own source revenues within a very short time. And we must encourage these governors, Honorable Speaker, so that even those of us who sit here and you have intent of being governors, don't just look for positions of governors to go and start crying out loud, oh, how much money have we not received from the central government? By the time you are getting money from the center, you should have generated adequate revenues to pay your workers so that the money you get from the center goes to development. But it cannot be, and it's not feasible, Honorable Speaker, that 90% of our governors are crying for money from the center to pay salaries. It is not feasible, Honorable Speaker. But we must also, and we have an obligation as members of parliament and as lawmakers, to make laws that will ensure that our governors have systems where they can collect, whether it is these rates from property, whether it is levies for the massive infrastructural development that we have seen across many of our counties in water and sanitation. Honorable Speaker, many of our people assume that sewer, because it's sewerage and it's filth, is free. Yes, it is free when you are pumping it out of your body and flushing it out of your toilet. But when it gets into a county government funded or a government funded sewer system, you as a person who has dispensed that sewer should be paying to the county government. And the county governments must ensure they have even metered ways of being able to collect revenue from sewer, so that the more you use and the more you dispense into the sewer system to go to Embakasi, Ruai, and wherever, Honorable Speaker, you pay. Because you pay to eat. So pay to also dispense what you eat, Honorable Speaker, and where it ends up, you must pay. I say this, Honorable Speaker, because I have seen a lot of communities protesting. They cheer when government is creating sewer and water systems in their villages and their backyards, but they don't want to pay for those systems. And they forget those sewerage systems are being done for your own health. And Dr. Nyikal will tell you here, being a very good doctor, former director of health in the Ministry of Health, do estates, these gated communities we are doing, as I was indicating, Honorable Speaker, drill a borehole, have 20, 30 septic tanks. The water that percolates into the aquifers, that water is going when it is already polluted. And it is the same water that we then pump out from boreholes without treating. Because we say, oh, it's borehole water, it's clean water. Part of it is very dangerous water and dangerous for our health, Honorable Speaker. But land developers and property developers will never let you do this. But as government, as legislators, you have a duty and a responsibility to ensure that the water our people drink is secure and is safe. And therefore, we also have a duty to ensure that we secure the sources of revenue that our county governments will be able to generate revenue out of, so that they're able to provide the sewer systems, the clean water and safe drinking water, Honorable Speaker, provide secure environments by giving our estates and our neighborhoods street lighting, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, as I move, let me encourage all of us to support this bill and to think through all our neighborhoods. Those who come from our cities, have in mind the housing agenda and the new owners of property. How will someone who owns a studio on the 40th floor of a building in Ziwani pay for rates to the county government because he's enjoying to the 40th floor? He will expect to have clean drinking water and clean water to flush their toilets and use their showers. Therefore, they must be paying something to their county government for their county government of Nairobi to be able to provide that clean water and sewer services in that city. Those of us who come from rural and peri-urban constituencies, let us also have in mind the issues I'm speaking to, and I hope the chair who will be seconding this chair in charge of the Lands Committee will put in mind the issues I've spoken to on land that is being used for agriculture, so that we also secure and encourage land used for agriculture. Because when it becomes fashionable and more profitable to only build brick and mortar, then all our agricultural land will end up with brick and mortar, and eventually will become a net importer of food. Honorable Speaker, I had the opportunity this Sunday to visit a farm in Taita Taveta County, and I was impressed with the potential of agriculture even in what are otherwise very dry areas of our country, semi-arid and arid areas. The potential, the soils are fertile and all they lack is water. And with provision of water, we can turn around and make our country food secure. But even as we do that, we must bear in mind 10 to 50 years to come, what will happen to our country if we discourage our farmers, if we even discourage our young people from getting into agriculture through taxes that we are levying either on farm implements, and I must thank the Finance Committee because they were deliberate during the Finance Bill. As I keep repeating, Honorable Speaker, the Finance Act is vilified without people paying regard to the very good propositions that lay in that Finance Act, where farm implements, farm inputs were zero-rated, some taxes were removed from them, so that we even encourage people to get into farming, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, that's what I'm saying, even as we consider this bill, I hope during the third reading, the Committee on Lands will ensure that we also safeguard that aspect of agricultural land so that, again, our counties do not levy property rates on agricultural land or land set aside for use for agriculture, Honorable Speaker. And as I said, I have that good experience in Kiambu County, because there is no distinction between land that is agricultural and land that is for other developments. And therefore, you find farmers now are opting to subdivide their land and build houses, because that is the only way they will be able to pay the rates, the rates that are being levied by their county governments. Therefore, we must have a distinction so that a farmer who is growing vegetables in Kikuyu or a farmer who is growing avocados in Muranga does not get encouraged to get into housing and subdivide his land into 30 by 70s to be able to generate more money, to be able to pay the rates to their county government, but they can grow their avocados, they can grow their vegetables, and be able to pay affordable rates to their county governments. And I would even propose that land set aside for agriculture, the property rates be almost zero or negligible. It should be 0.00000005%. So that there is something, but there is nothing. So that food, you know, I've seen people, the other day, they were in the streets telling us, we do not want houses, we want food. The place to come and say you want food is here with this bill. And make it happen. The place to make sure that we have policies, that we encourage farmers to grow crops even within our urban areas. I was saying now Kajiado, if you go to Kitengela, you go to Isinya, all the way almost to Bisil, all that land now is going up in brick and mortar. But it's fertile land, virgin land, where nobody has ever farmed. If anything, it's only animals that have done their business on that land and provided compost organic manure that makes the land very fertile. Therefore, we must encourage our young people in Kajiado, in Kiambu, and in every part of this country to get into agriculture so that we say we are food secure, so that tomorrow, and I must appreciate that now food prices are going down. Honorable Speaker, you know, when the President said that the other day that you do not, food doesn't come from the market, it comes from the farms. People thought it was a joke. And we told them that food prices in this country will come down. I am glad. I have seen even the hateful media, those who can never write anything good about this administration, at least today they are publishing news saying that eventually food prices are coming down, which is a good thing, because we did the right thing by subsidizing inputs for agriculture, encouraging people to go back to the farms. And I must thank even those of our colleagues from the minority who have seen the wisdom of getting out of the streets and joining other Kenyans in the farms, members of parliament joining us back in the House to legislate and give rise to policies that will make food more affordable to the people of Kenya. This is the way that we must encourage each other to work, and I welcome the Honorable Mwenje, the Honorable Zamzam, the Honorable Member for Starehe back to the House after the short stint in the streets, and I'm sure they will now have time to settle down and now learn how to be good legislators by coming to propagate issues that touch on the people of Nyamakima here in the House, Honorable Mwenje, those that touch on the people where sewer flows to through Embakasi West. So that now you must tell the people they must pay for the sewer. And you pay depending on how much you dispense into the sewer system. With those very many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and ask the very able chair for Lands Committee, Honorable Nyamoko, to second this bill. Honorable Nyamoko has done a good job, and let me thank the committee, Honorable Speaker, in closing, because they did put in a lot of work in considering this bill and tabled a report in record time. And I thank Honorable Nyamoko and all members of the Lands Committee. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I ask the Honorable Nyamoko to second.
Thank you, Honorable Majority Leader. But before Honorable Joash seconds, allow me to interrupt and recognize some of the schools, considering that there's a very high traffic levels in the galleries, and we have some that are traveling far. Some have even left the galleries. I will recognize the following school: Kigumo Girls in absentia from Kigumo constituency. In Moranga County, they were in the public gallery. I'm told they have left. And the member of Parliament, Honorable Munyoro, has actually welcomed them to the House. I recognize Babadogo Primary School from Ruaraka constituency, Nairobi County. I recognize Utini Girls, Kibwezi West, Makueni County. I recognize Kanyuabora Boys, Mbere North constituency, Embu County. I recognize from the Speaker's Gallery, St. Bakita Siakago Girls, Mbere North, Embu County, St. Catherine Gaturi Girls, Mbere North, Embu County. And on behalf of the House, I welcome you to observe the proceedings of this House. I then give this chance to Honorable Joash Nyamoko to second the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity for me to second this motion. I rise to second. But before I do so, I want also to take this opportunity to thank the Leader of Majority for eloquently moving this particular bill, and also for breaking down the elements of the bill, which has made and simplified the actual proposal, the legislative proposal, that we had an opportunity as a Committee of Lands to walk through. Madam Speaker, I want to say from the onset that when we interacted with this particular legislative proposal, we came and we are convicted that this is a very progressive proposal, and I'm very sure that it will have a profound impact on the revenue collection measures which have been put up by the Kenya Kwanza government. That's if it's passed. And I'm very sure also that the county governments across the country will be able to raise money beyond what they're collecting at the moment. Madam Speaker, the National Ratings Bill seeks to provide for a very comprehensive legal framework in how they are going to levy properties and land in the country. It also provides a mechanism on how valuation of rateable properties will be undertaken, and also there's an element of the appointment of all valuers, the setting up of the criteria for the appointments of valuers, and also it will provide for the establishment and determination of powers and functions of a national rating valuation tribunal. This is something that we've not had, and even when we interacted with the Council of Governors, they had a proposal that it could have been better for them to have these tribunals set up in the 47 county governments, but we didn't find it tenable. The bill seeks to give effect to Article number 190, as eloquently articulated by the Honorable Leader of Majority. That's Article number 2, and also Article 209 of the Constitution, by providing a uniform legislative framework and a mechanism on how the county governments are going to undertake those functions which have already been highlighted. Madam Speaker, currently, levying of property rates in Kenya relies on Valuation of Rating Act Cap 266 and Rating Act Cap 267. These acts, which were enacted in 1956 and 1964 respectively, are outdated and lack a clear legal framework to guide the county governments in achieving optimal property rates collection, as they are not aligned to the Constitution, which, Madam Speaker, we passed in 2010, and the devolved system of the government. By the application of these outdated legislations, it implies that the county governments are not able to realize their full potential because they are basing their collections or the rates on these laws which were passed in the 60s. And that's why it has become very important and prudent for us to relook at this particular space. Madam Speaker, in 2018, the National Treasury, with the assistance of the World Bank, commissioned a study by Adam Smith International on own source of revenue potential and tax gap study, of which the Kenya county governments, in the county governments, among the key objectives of the study was to map out counties' local revenue potential base. The study established substantially and realized county revenue potential ranging between 55 billion and 173 billion as compared to what is being collected today, which is 35 billion that counties are collecting. So if you look at this 35 billion, it doesn't even fall between the brackets of the potential that we have, which is between 55 and 173. Madam Speaker, when they were doing this study, they were also able to determine that most of the revenues which are collected by the county governments, this particular one, which is revenue collected from the properties and land rates, it's not as attractive as what is usually collected from the parking fees, what is collected from health facilities. And when you look at this potential from the study and the conclusion which was undertaken by this study, it means that if we are able to do the actual implementation of bypassing this, we will be able to facilitate the county governments across the country and even the national government to collect more and more for the development of the country. Madam Speaker, the bill therefore seeks to repeal Valuation of Rating Act Cap 266 and the Rating Act Cap 267, which I've indicated were done in the 60s, by providing for a uniform legislative framework to regulate national government and county governments in imposing rates and valuing of properties as contemplated in the Constitution. The bill seeks to provide for enhancement, certainty, uniformity, and fairness in levying of property rates by the county governments. In other words, what we are going to have at the end of the day is just a single legislation which will regulate all the county governments and the national government. Unlike the case today where you have various county governments have come up with their own rating laws, which in most cases are at variance and are not very uniform. Madam Speaker, if you could allow me, then I'll go to the clause-by-clause analysis so that the House can have a detailed understanding on how this bill has been organized. So as I indicated, the main objective is to have the guiding principles on the application of the Act and use of technology. Clause 3 of the bill provides the objects and purpose of the bill, which number one is give effect of Article 191 and Article 209(3)(a) of the Constitution by providing for a uniform legislative framework, and number two, a mechanism on how the county governments shall undertake valuations for the rating and imposition of rates on rateable properties. These will also provide an enhanced use of appropriate technology in undertaking the valuation for the rating and rating-related purposes, and also provide for the roles of the chief government valuer in respect of collation of all valuation rolls prepared and deposited by the county governments. What we mean, Madam Speaker, by this is that all the county governments will be expected to undertake or develop valuation rolls which will be deposited to the chief government valuer who will be stationed at the national office. So in other words, we'll have one chief government valuer, but the respective valuers from various or from the 47 county governments will develop their own valuation rolls, which will then be deposited to the chief government valuer. Clause 4 of the bill, for the guiding principle of the bill, the clause provides that each county government shall, in implementing the provisions of the bill, number one, adhere to the national values and principles of governance as set out under Article 10 of the Constitution, ensure conformity to the values and principles of the public service as set out under Article 232 of the Constitution, and conform to the principles of public finance as set out under Article 210 of the Constitution. In Clause 5 of the bill regulates the application of the bill and provides that the Act shall to all rateable property within respective county governments. Clause 6 of the bill, that is the use of technology, and provides that each county government shall establish or employ appropriate technological systems in the preparation and the implementation of the valuation roll on the supplementary valuation rolls. Honorable Speaker, Part 2 of the bill, and that's clause number 7 to 20, contains a detailed provision regulating rating, including duty to levy rates, forms of rating, notices of rating, publication of rating area, annual rent of value rating, the notice of rates, payment of rates, remission of rates, discounts and waivers, enforcement of payment of rates, and contribution in lieu of rates. Part 3 of the bill, proposed bill, clause 21 to 25 contains a detailed provision regulating the appointment and the powers of valuers, including the criteria to be a valuer. That's for you to be appointed, the qualifications one is supposed to have, responsibilities of the valuers, powers of the valuers, and responsibilities of the chief government valuer. Madam Speaker, Part 4, that's clause 26 to 36, contains a detailed provision regulating the valuation for rating, including general basis of valuation, declaration of rateable rate areas, methods of valuation, preparation of valuation rolls, and supplementary valuation rolls. Contents of draft valuation rolls and draft supplemental valuation rolls. Alterations of the valuation rolls and supplemental valuation rolls. Deposit of draft valuation rolls and draft supplemental valuation rolls. Publication of the rolls, objections, uncontested draft valuation rolls and draft supplemental valuations rolls, and exemptions. Honorable Speaker, Part 5, that's clause number 37 to 53, contains a detailed provision regulating National Rating Tribunal, which contains a detailed provision for regulating establishment of National Tribunal, composition of the tribunal, jurisdiction of the tribunal, proceedings of the tribunal, oath of office, quorum, disclosure of interest, tenure, technical advice, arrangements of business, powers of the tribunal, remunerations, members of the tribunal, staff of the tribunal, vacancies of the tribunal, evidence and penalty for failure to comply with the tribunal's lawful order and appeals. Clause 37 of the bill establishes the national rating bill. Madam Speaker, Part 6, that's clause 3756, contains a detailed provision regulating miscellaneous, including notices and repeals. Part 7, clause 54 to 55, contains a detailed provision on delegated legislation. That's clause 56, 57, including regulations and savings and transitions. The first schedule contains a detailed provision regulating application for remission of the whole or part of the rateable payable to the owner of the rateable property. First schedule contains a detailed provision regulating contributions in lieu of the rates forms. The third schedule contains the rates objections form. The third schedule contains the oath or solemn affirmation of the allegiance of the chairperson and members of the tribunal. Madam Speaker, the said bill was first read on Wednesday, 8th March 2023, and it was subjected to public participation in accordance to Article 118 of the Constitution and Standing Order number 127 of the National Assembly Standing Orders, having been placed in an advert in the print media on Thursday, 16th March 2023, inviting public submission, memoranda, and the bill. By close of business on Tuesday, 21st March 2023, the committee had received submissions from the National Land Commission, the State Department of Lands and Fiscal Planning, and the National Treasury and the Council of Governors, all of which are contained in the report which we presented. The committee sat and did analysis of the views which were presented by those various agencies that I've mentioned, Madam Speaker. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the committee, as the Committee on Lands, for their input and for the engagement they had during the processing of this particular bill. And having considered and taken into account the views and the recommendations of the public, including the relevant stakeholders, the committee recommended that this bill be considered during the third reading. Madam Speaker, with that, I second.
Other members, I therefore propose that the National Rating Bill, National Assembly Bill number 55 of 2022, be read a second time. Honorable members, before I give the members to contribute, allow me to recognize yet more students in our galleries today. In the public gallery, ACK St. Paul Mihote, Mathioya constituency, Muranga County, and in the Speaker's Gallery, St. Francis Girls Mangu, Gatundu North constituency, Kiambu County. On behalf of the House, I welcome you to observe these proceedings of the House. This chance will go to the member, Honorable Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From the onset, I wish to state that I support the motion. Clarity of law governing land as a principal factor of revenue collection in any country, generation in any country, is of great importance and cannot be overemphasized. It has been said that the rule of law in the ecosystem of investments is a vital source of progress and sustainability in development. So it is very important to relook at and continue to progressively assess how the laws governing our urban centers in relationship in its growth and also in the development and our economy. One, it creates an environment within which our people can enhance their creativity, can flourish, and can increase their prosperity in building the economy in the nation. Madam Speaker, the law plays a very important role, and especially this time as we continue to implement and enjoy the fruits of devolution in this country. Some urban centers which falls on the boundary requires some clarity of management because it has become a source of conflict between communities that operates in markets and also authorities that are concerned. Sometimes you'd never know whether it falls on this county or the other one, but I think as we look at this, it is going to sort out some of the ambiguities governing the same. By improving our relook on our laws pertaining on revenue collection also in this area, we are also helping to foster development by strengthening the voices of the people and individuals and communities when they are requiring to access justice. So the easier it is for them, and the easier it is made for them, it creates some confidence when their rights are violated. Madam Speaker, I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Vice Chair of Lands Committee, Member for Naivasha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Being a member of the Lands Committee, I think I support the bill because I'm definitely part of it. And all that needs to be said has been said by the majority leader and my chair, because this bill seeks to harmonize the erratic way rating of properties have been done. If you see, the last enactment of 1956, and then the next one in 1964, it is way before we enacted the 2010 Constitution. So this bill seeks to tighten the loose ends and also facilitate county government to get the revenue that they need in conformity with the new Constitution. And with technology in place, Madam Speaker, that tells us that even those counties that have been complaining of not getting their funds or taxes that they need to collect, this thing will tie, the bill will tie all those ends, and they'll have a way, other than the erratic way things have been done, they have a way of collecting their revenue. So I'm part of this bill because I am in that committee. So we have gone through it. We have talked to all the stakeholders, and it is only in order that I support and I ask the House to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Wilberforce Oundo, member for Funyula.
For 30 minutes. Honorable Speaker, the leader of majority.
Just to be clear, Honorable Member, you have 10 minutes, maximum of 10 minutes.
Honorable Speaker, because the majority leader recognizing my expertise and over 30 years.
What's your point of order, leader of majority?
Honorable Speaker, I am aware that the Honorable Udo has 10 minutes, but I was only begging, signaling the Speaker that the Honorable Udo is an authority on valuation, is a land economist. Therefore, if you would be kind enough to add him 5 or 10 minutes, we will benefit immensely to enrich this bill.
Leader of Majority, the Speaker is signaled, but we made these rules, and I know Honorable Undo will be, being an economist, will be economical with his words to fit in 10 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I must declare that I'm a registered valuer, having practiced for over 30 years. I have been a lecturer of both valuation and land taxation, and obviously, I'm happy that finally what we set out when we started the land reforms, the process of land reforms sometimes 1990s, to consolidate and harmonize various land laws or land administration laws is now coming to fruition. Honorable Speaker, what we are talking about here today is in the realm of land administration that talks about issue of titling, registration, taxation, and the rest. And I'm happy, Honorable Speaker, we are putting into effect Article 209(3) of the Constitution that allows county governments to levy taxes, and one of the taxes allowed to levy is land rates, entertainment, and its licenses for trading and businesses. Honorable Speaker, the bill essentially tries or attempts or has collapsed 2 different bills or 2 different acts we have used for practice, as they have clearly said, since early 1950s or late 1950s and independence. That is the Rating Act and Valuation for Rating Act. And Honorable Speaker, so essentially they have combined the two and tried all they could to expand and enrich to fit the requirement of the Constitution of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, in the issue of land administration, the central point here, and I think the majority leader tried to allude to it, is the issue of land information management system. Honorable Speaker, under the committee of the whole House, the issue of integrating land management information system at the National Land Registry and the county level in respect of the evaluation role has to be central to this particular bill. And I hope the Committee of Lands has had technical advice and technical input to make sure that we incorporate the same. Without the integrated land information management system, Honorable Speaker, this bill, when it becomes an act, will just be like the other that we have had before. Honorable Speaker, in the realm of land taxation, there are a few issues that we must put in place. Number one, what is it that we are taxing? When you have land, and that's why progressive legislation have gotten away from the reference to land and are now talking about property taxation, to expand the definition of property as in law as compared to the limited definition of land. So here the question is, what are we taxing? Are we taxing income from the ownership of the property? Or are we taxing the brick and the mortar? Or are we taxing the physical attribute of the land? I see in the bill there has been an attempt to make it loose-ended, that at any given time, the any rating authority in this event, the county government, can choose any mode to use to tax. But essentially, when you look at the Constitution, the public finance section seems to say that there must be uniformity in taxation, so that there must be some predictability, so that if I'm in Mombasa, I'm an investor in Mombasa, I want to own a property, and I have another investor in Seaport, I own a property, there must be certainty on the amount of taxes I'm going to pay. And therefore, as we move forward, we must, as a country, make that conscious and deliberate decision that what form of rating do we adopt? Do we adopt an improved site value? Do we adopt improved property value? or do we go for area rating? Honorable Speaker, that's the first part, which a debate must be exhausted. And that's why the link of integrated land information management system becomes critical, because then it will tell us what is the kind of land, what kind of the use of the property do we have at that particular moment. Secondly, and most important, equally important, is the issue of identification of the property. When you look at the Land Registration Act of 2012, talks about the boundaries must be delineated and identified using geographical positioning system. Unfortunately, Honorable Speaker, and I would seek that answer from the Minister for CS for Lands in due course, the number of titles that have been placed under GPS or geographical positioning system are very, very few. So again, without having the proper infrastructure in place, this bill that we are proposing to have uniform application throughout the country is going to be tedious and might not work. What has been happening since the proclamation of the new constitution is that county governments have been domesticating the Rating Act and the Evaluation for Rating Act for purposes of undertaking or preparing evaluation role in order to collect revenue. Honorable Speaker, the third most important thing is the identification of the rateable owner. Who is the rateable owner? And this brings into question, who draws the benefits? When is an owner, is a leaseholder for 10 years, can he be considered an owner or not? So that's a debate we must go through over time, because that has been the lacuna in law. You find that quite a number of properties have been rates have been charged on the wrong party, yet the person who drives benefits, actual benefits, is another person. So again, Honorable Speaker, we must have that debate as we go ahead, as we enrich this bill. Honorable Speaker, of course, the most controversial and contentious issue has been the rate to be applied, the rate struck to be applied. Honorable Speaker, all over the world, and if you look at the history of land taxation, started during the feudal system in the UK, where they say the owners of the land, as they derive benefits from public service, they must pay back for the maintenance and expansion of those services. All over the world, taxation has always been an emotive issue, has been a political issue. And if anybody ever doubted the politics of taxation, must have seen with the just forcibly enacted Finance Act. So obviously, as part of the amendments, we'll make enrichment that are before the county executive committee member responsible says the rate struck, there must be adequate public participation. And there must be public participation that makes meaning. Unlike what you have heard in the past, where members of public state and make submissions, submit petitions, memorandum, which are routinely and carelessly, casually ignored, and with a certain legislation is rammed through, which has got very serious consequences. So one of the issues that we are now seeing in academia, that in the setting of the rate struck, there must be some kind of compelling public participation that whatever is said becomes compulsory. In many countries, Honorable Speaker, to impose even a tax, you have to go to referendum for the members to agree whether we go for referendum or not. Honorable Speaker, again, in any particular area, I have seen in this bill, they say the county government is a rating authority. And they say all the properties in the county government will be subject to a rating.
Honorable Undo, given your expertise and the fact that you hired the leader of majority to be your lawyer, I will exercise my discretion and add you 5 minutes. I see your time is running out.
For the first time, the leader has been sympathetic to the majority of Kenyans. So, Honorable Speaker, the debate that we must have here is that the bill proposes that the rating authority will be the county government. And they say it suggests that all the properties in the county government within the jurisdiction of the county will be subject to rating. And Honorable Speaker, this has been an age-long debate all over the world, that if you impose a tax rate, a uniform tax rate, or a segregated tax rate, yet the income, the benefits being derived from ownership of a property is not uniform, you end up disadvantaging and punishing those who have got marginal use of their property. For example, Honorable Speaker, a peasant farmer in the area Muranga or in the area Kiambu here, who has got very little he extracts from that piece of land, ask him to pay rates at the same rate like somebody from this side of Kabete, where they collect gold in form of coffee, is emotionally unfair and politically disadvantageous. The thinking has always been, under the Constitution, county governments are allowed to declare an area an urban area under the Urban Areas and Cities Act. So that's the kind of discussion we must have, that should we punish peasant farmers wherever they are. Of course, there have been arguments here in Nairobi that what happens, somebody comes and puts up a a residential block and lives there. Should the rest be the same? But the other part of the debate, Honorable Speaker, is that what happens for owner-occupied, a retiree who occupies his house, has no income, the only income he has is pension. How would you force him to pay rent at a certain level beyond even the rent you could have derived from that particular area? So, Honorable Speaker, it's a debate that we must continue and we must continue to have. The Act, Honorable Speaker, introduces a curious position, two curious positions that are either in law or in the Constitution. That one of the chief government valuer. That's an administrative position in the Ministry of Lands. And again, without constitutional or statutory powers, the chief government valuer might not be able to instruct the county governments to do anything. In any case, Honorable Speaker, it will now be important for us to look at it, as well as look at the Land Act, the Land Registration Act, so that we anchor the position of the chief government valuer in both the acts so that it can have effect on this matter. Honorable Speaker, the other debate is the issue of who is a government valuer, a private valuer. Honorable Speaker, a valuer is a valuer. There's no private valuer, there's no public valuer, there's no government valuer. Just like a lawyer, a teacher is a teacher. Whether they teach in private schools or they teach in public schools, is a teacher. Honorable Speaker, we remember we have the Sectional Properties Act, number 20 of 2020, that has brought a new appreciation that there can be a title in the air. During our times, we used to ask, whose roof is it? That you live in a block of flats, whose roof is it? When the leakage starts on the top of the house, of the block of flat, and affects the ground floor, whose roof is it? So again, the bill must align itself to the Sectional Properties Act, number 20 of 2020, so that we are able to maximize revenue as a result of property taxation. Honorable Speaker, I appreciate the extra time given, and because it takes almost 90 hours to train somebody on land taxation. It takes about 306 hours to train undergraduate on valuation. I cannot cover all the principles at this particular level. But suffice to say that the cardinal principle of taxation is equity. Is it fair? Second cardinal of taxation is the issue of the cost of administration. I am afraid saying that we will be preparing a new valuation roll after 5 years is going to be extremely expensive and cumbersome. Honorable Speaker, from my personal experience,
whatever technology you use, you cannot prepare a valuation roll for even a middle-sized town in less than 1 year. Because getting documentation to prove ownership is a problem. The registry index maps are not regularly updated, so you have to go through the process of updating the same. Getting the GPS coordinates and getting all those things, it takes a long, long period of time. In the past, we have been having a 10-year period. But in the event there is an rise in the property values, nothing stops the county government from preparing a supplementary valuation roll specifically for that area that they think has improved. For example, as the majority leader has been saying, he has got a piece of land behind Lenana High School. When the bypass went through, the value naturally shot up. So in that event, you can even do a linear valuation roll to accommodate the changes in the values. Because I foresee a situation whereby it will be extremely expensive and cumbersome. Because again, remember, the process of objection, the process of the National Rating Tribunal, you have to go to court, the environment and the land court is going to be extremely cumbersome. We would ask the committee and we'd ask the drafters of the bill to consider a longer period of time so that there is value for the money spent preparing this particular valuation roll. Honorable Speaker, again, as I conclude, there are a few issues, of course, that needs to be clearly understood, and therefore, at the committee of the whole House, I will spare enough time, prepare adequate amendments, and we hope we'll have a bipartisan approach to those amendments so that it does not become that debacle that was the finance bill on the floor of this House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the time, extended time, and I can now see friendships don't die even when positions change. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Asante mbunge wa Funyula. Nafasi hii nitampa mbunge wa Mombasa, Mheshimiwa Zamzam.
Mheshimiwa Spika, na mimi niweze kuchukua fursa hii kuweza kuunga mjadala huu wa leo na bili ambayo imeletwa na ndugu yetu ambayo ni mwakilishi wa wengi ndani ya bunge hili. Mara ya kwanza nitakuwa mbunifu na kuweza kusema na mpiga support kubwa sana katika bili hii, kwa sababu ni bili ambayo kwa kweli imeweza kushika watu wengi sana. Na mimi nataka kusema hivi. Kwanza alisahau kutaja gavana wangu wa Mombasa. Gavana wetu Abdulswamad Sharif Nasir ndio amekuwa katika wale bora zaidi, ndio aliongoza katika wale ambao wamekusanya ushuru, ambaye aliongoza kuwa number 1. Kwa hiyo nampongeza kwanza gavana wangu Abdulswamad. Jambo lingine nataka kusema kuwa imekuwa dhahiri shairi kuwa wale ambao wamekuwa na mashamba na wamejenga nyumba zao ndani ya mashamba haya, wengine wamekuwa hawana chochote na wamekuwa wakitoa ushuru sawia na wale ambao pengine wamejenga nyumba, wameweka wapangaji ndani yake na wanakusanya mapeni. Kwa hiyo hii bili ya leo mimi nimeifurahia sana, kwa sababu yule mnyonge ambaye hana kitu na yeye pia aweze kupewa mwanya wa kuweza kutafuta wakati ule ambapo atakuwa yuko sawa, aweza pia yeye kufanya maendeleo na akalipa ushuru sawia na wenzake. Na pia mwenzangu amezungumzia na mimi niweze kulipigia pono. Kuna watu ambao walikuwa wameajiriwa, lakini sasa miaka imepita, pengine wameingia retire na waliamua katika mashamba yao ambao yako mjini waweze kujenga tu majumba yao. Hawana mpangaji, hawana yoyote yule wa kuwasaidia, isipokuwa pale ni makao ambao wamekaa wao. Kwa hiyo pia ningependa kusema watu kama hawa wasiwekwe sawia na watu ambao wanalipa ushuru mkubwa ule wa kukusanya katika rent. Na hata ikiwezekana, mimi ningeomba watu kama hawa ambao hawana chochote wasiweze kulipa kabisa mpaka wakati ambapo wataanza kudevelop ile mashamba yao, ndio wanaweza kulipa ushuru. Jambo nyingine ambao ningependa kuupongeza bili hii, kuna wale ambao wametoka mataifa ya nje wamekuja wamechukua mashamba hapa Kenya, wamejenga pengine, wameinvest, wameweka biashara zao. Huwezi kulinganisha biashara zao pamoja na yule Mkenya ambao biashara yake iko duni. Kwa hiyo ushuru ambao unakusanywa isiwe sawia na yule ambao ni Mkenya halisi, iwe huyu wa Kenya aweze kutoa ushuru mdogo, huyu ambaye amekuja kufanya biashara hapa Kenya aweze kutoa ushuru wa juu kidogo. Kwa sababu hata sisi pia tukienda katika mataifa yao hatusazwi kule. Tunatolewa ushuru kama yule mtu ambaye ametoka taifa lingine kuja kuinvest katika mataifa yao. Kwa hiyo na Kenya pia tuige mfano huo, tuweze na sisi kuwatoza hawa ushuru zaidi. Na Mheshimiwa Spika, juzi nimekuwa Ethiopia, na kitu ambacho nilikipata kule nimetamani iwe katika taifa letu. Ethiopia walivyofanya ni kuwa mashamba yao hawauzii watu wa nje, watu wakuja, tunasema watu ambao wametoka nje ya taifa, hawauzii. Shamba linabaki pengine kama ni Kenya linabaki ni la Wakenya tu. Kwa sababu utapata watu ambao wametoka mataifa mengine, wamekuja wamechukua mashamba yetu, huyu Mkenya anabaki kuwa hana chochote. Kwa hiyo sheria imewapa wale kuchukua shamba kwa kuwekeza tu kwa muda fulani. Baada ya muda fulani wanaachia watu wao mashamba yao. Lakini sasa hapa Kenya iko tofauti. Mtu amenunua shamba na enjoy, pengine alipata yule Mkenya ambao ni halisi alikuwa na matatizo kidogo, hajui ile value ya shamba yake, akaweza kuitoa kwa bei ya chini, amebaki anahangaika na watoto, amekuwa maskini. Ni sheria ambayo ningependa ije hapa Kenya, lakini ni ya siku nyingine ambayo tuweza kuijadili hapa bungeni. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi ningependa kusema kuwa kuna pia sintofahamu katika wale ambao wamechukua haya mashamba ndani ya mji. Pengine walipewa allotment notice ambao wamechukua mashamba, lakini kuweza kupewa zile title deed pia imekuwa kizungumkuti. Ni jambo ambalo ningependa pia Mheshimiwa Majority Leader aweze kuligusia, ili mtu akipewa allotment amenunua shamba pengine kwa county government, iwe itafuatana kabisa na ile title deed. Isiwe kuwa mtu anaanza kuzungushwa huku na huku wakati ambapo analipa ushuru. Na mimi ningependa kusema kuwa pia hata county government waangalie. Kuna mtu amekaa miaka mingi sana kwenye shamba, amelipa ushuru, amerenew pengine, amelipa tena. Tuangalie pia watu hawa, tuangalie kwa jicho la upole, ili hata kama wanalipa ushuru nao wawe na furaha wa kuweza kulipa ushuru. Mheshimiwa Spika, masala ya ushuru yamekuwa donda sugu na utata katika taifa hili. Na pengine mimi ningependa kumkosoa kidogo Majority Leader, alituambia sisi tulikuwa barabarani. Mimi nataka kumuelewesha kuwa hatukuwa barabarani kwa kupenda, hapana. Ni vile hali ya maisha ilivyo ngumu, hali ya maisha ilivyo tata. Kwa hiyo kwenda kwetu sisi kule, hata yeye kesho na ana nafasi ya kuingia pia kule barabarani akaweza kujieleza na akaweza kusikizwa. Lakini katika hili la mashamba mimi nampongeza sana, na mimi nataka kusema kuwa hii italeta uchumi bora katika taifa yetu. Na wale ambao wana mashamba na pengine wana majumba wamepangisha watu, na waombeni musiwe mnachelewesha ule ushuru, kwa sababu huu ushuru ndio unatumiwa kujenga taifa. Huu ushuru kikawia sana, mambo yanaenda sio sawa, na unapata Mkenya ule wa chini kabisa anahangaika. Tujibidishe sana kwenye kulipa ushuru, na tuangalie kuwa huu ushuru pia ukitolewa, hizi pesa zikikusanywa ziende kwa mifuko ambayo italeta tajriba katika jamii, iende kwenye mifuko ambao utaleta maendeleo katika jamii, iende kwa mfuko wa kuonyesha kuwa ushuru wa Kenya wametoa lakini kuna maendeleo yanaonekana. Wale ambao ni wanyonge katika jamii pia nao waangaliwe pia katika mfuko wao, waweza wakaangaliwa vipi. Hii yote inatokana na kulipa ushuru kwa wakati. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nimesimama kusapoti mjadala huu wa leo, na mimi nataka niseme hivi. Pale Mombasa County kuna ndugu zetu ambao walikaa hapo miaka mingi sana na hawajapata hati miliki za mashamba yao. Lakini kuna watu ambao wanachukua ushuru wa shamba na hawako ndani ya Mombasa. Na hili mimi nimeitwa na wazee ambao ni wazee Council of Elders wa Mombasa, wakanilalamikia sana. Unapata mtu ni wa taifa kutoka Oman, lakini yeye ndo anakusanya ushuru kutoka ndani ya Mombasa County katika yale majumba. Mimi ningeomba pia kama county government ya Mombasa wangeweza kulifuatilia jambo hili, na mimi kama mama county wa Mombasa niweze pia kulileta katika jumba hili ili tuweze kujadili. Wale wanaolipa ushuru pale wamekaa miaka mingi hapo, lakini kuna mtu mahali anasema haya mashamba ni yangu, lakini huyu mtu si Mkenya, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kwa hiyo tuangalie pia kama tunakusanya ushuru, tunakusanya rates kutoka katika mashamba yetu, lakini tuhakikishe kuwa si rates zinakusanywa zinaenda kujenga mataifa mengine. Iwe ni hizi rates zinakusanywa zinajenga mataifa yetu sisi wenyewe, yajenga taifa letu sisi wenyewe. Na tuangalie kuwa wale ambao hawana hati miliki, wale ambao wamekaa katika mashamba haya miaka mingi na wamekaa wakilipa ushuru, ni wakati ambao kwamba pia na wao serikali iangalie waweze pia kupewa hizi title deeds. Mheshimiwa Spika, huu mjadala wa leo ni mjadala mpana sana. Niwapongeze wenzangu kwa kutilia pono kwa ujuzi ambao wamejitolelea leo kuzungumza na kusema kuwa hata kama wale wa kutoka nje watalipa na wao wasiwe sawa na Wakenya walipe juu kushinda Wakenya. Hiyo ndo sasa sheria ambayo sisi tunataka. Sio kuwa wale ambao ni Wakenya wananyanyaswa, mtu anafikiri sasa mimi nimepata pesa kidogo hapa, nitalipa ushuru ama nitanunua chakula. Kwa hiyo hawa ambao ni Wakenya na wamekaa miaka mingi katika haya mashamba, ushuru wao kidogo wapunguziwe kwa sababu hali ya maisha iko tata sana. Na wale ambao wamekuja kuinvest, wana majumba, wamejenga magorofa, wanakusanya rates, wanakusanya rent katika mashamba haya, katika nyumba hizi, waweze kufanya nini? Kulipa ushuru kwa wakati. La mwisho nitapenda kusema wale wanaofanya ukulima, Mheshimiwa Spika, watolewe kabisa katika kulipa rates ili tuweze kukuza chakula katika taifa hili, ili tuweze kupata chakula cha kutosha. Mheshimiwa Spika, taifa hili linategemea wakulima. Kwa hiyo tuwapunguzie gharama hata zaidi ili tuweze kupata mavuno mengi na uchumi uende kupanda juu na ile tax iweze kurudi chini. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Asante Mheshimiwa Zamzam. Nafasi hii itamwendea Mheshimiwa wa Marakwet Magharibi, Mheshimiwa Timothy Toroitich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this very important legislation that has been proposed, that is the National Rating Bill. Madam Speaker, before joining this parliament, I worked in the County Assembly of Elgeyo Marakwet as a legal counsel. Madam Speaker, the biggest challenge that we have in this country is something called duplication of legislation, or, Madam Speaker, competing legislations. Madam Speaker, the quality of our legislation is determined by uniformity. Madam Speaker, if you realize, in this country, we devolve law-making powers to the county governments. So, Madam Speaker, what has happened is each county government is making a law to suit its own purpose. Madam Speaker, so that you find that in neighboring counties, each county has its own form of legislation. So, Madam Speaker, in terms of interpretation, if you buy a land that is adjacent to another county, when it's taken to court and there are different legislations governing a subject matter, it becomes challenging in the court addressing that particular situation. Madam Speaker, you also realize that the biggest challenge that bedevils county governments is the collection of revenue. Madam Speaker, the own source of revenue in the county governments has been a very big challenge, so that county governments rely heavily on the national government in terms of revenue. So, Madam Speaker, if we have such a uniform legislation in the country, then there will be an equal application of the law, so that we avoid county governments coming up with their own laws, which at some points, if it is subjected to the national law, then that law becomes incompetent. Madam Speaker, there is an interesting provision that I've seen in Clause 7.2 of that bill, which, Madam Speaker, says that county legislation shall be in compliance with this act. Madam Speaker, since we have several legislations in the county governments, and each county government applies the law in its own instance, then, Madam Speaker, we have a situation here where if there is a conflict between a county government law in terms of rating of property and
the national law, then it is very clear under clause 72A that the national law shall prevail. Madam Speaker, for me, that is a big achievement in this proposed legislation, so that there is a clear hierarchy of laws in terms of the rating of properties in this country. Madam Speaker, another plus that I've seen in this particular legislation is the creation of the National Rating Tribunal. Madam Speaker, for me, that is a big plus, because if you have a National Rating Tribunal, then it will assist this country in terms of solving matters to do with the issue of property rates. Madam Speaker, the problem that we have in this country is the backlog of cases in our courts. So if we have a tailor-made tribunal that is specifically meant to address matters to do with disputes in terms of property rates, then, Madam Speaker, Honorable Speaker, it will assist so much in terms of solving disputes in this country. Madam Speaker, sorry, I see Mr. Speaker is on the seat.
Never refer to the presiding speaker as madam again. You know the presiding speaker is against everything that confuses gender.
Well,
I'm not an LGBTQ, I'm a biological male adult Kenyan person.
Honorable
Anyway,
Speaker,
proceed,
Honorable
okay.
Speaker, I am well guided on that area. So, Madam, Honorable Speaker, we now have a comprehensive legislation that will be able to handle matters to do with property rates in this country. Honorable Speaker, I was saying earlier that we have had haphazard legislations in this country when it comes to property rates. Honorable Speaker, each county has been enacting its own legislation. But as Honorable Speaker, now we have a uniform legislation that will provide uniformity in matters to do with property rates and the rating of property in this country. So, Honorable Speaker, I fully endorse this particular legislation, in particular on matters to do with uniformity of laws in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have to relook clearly, because we devolved lawmaking to county governments. So what is happening at the county government is, one, you've said that disaster management is a county government function under the 4th schedule. What has happened? We have 48 different legislation on disaster management in this country. Land is devolved. But we have also allowed county governments to create legislations on rating of property. So we have 48 different legislations in this country in respect to rating. So what happens? When there is a conflict in a court of law in respect to, for example, the rating act of a certain county X, then it becomes very hard for the court to make a determination. But, Honorable Speaker, as I said earlier, there is a very clear provision under Clause 7.2, which says that county legislation shall be in compliance with this act. Honorable Speaker, meaning that if a certain county passes a certain legislation on rating, and there is a dispute in terms of application of that particular provision relating to a law in that county, then we have a check and balances in terms of the National Rating Act. So, Mr. Speaker, I encourage, personally as a lawyer, I encourage this kind of legislation, especially on matters that are devolved, so that in as much as county governments have powers to make law, then we should have a uniform national law to be able to check the excesses of a law that exists in the county government. Mr. Speaker, I beg to rest my case.
Honorable Torotich, the Parliament normally benefits from your wisdom. I know you are anxious to rest, but you are also a very experienced lawyer. If it is that the national government is to do laws cutting across all counties, then what would county assemblies be doing?
Honorable Speaker.
And number two,
yes,
just as you conclude, how would you deal with areas in which titles have not been issued, or areas where we have land group representatives, community lands? You know, areas like Masai land, areas like those vast areas of North.
That is...
And for that, don't hurry, you'll be added as many minutes as you want to clarify that.
Honorable Speaker, it is not only northeastern parts of this country that we have challenges of land that has not been adjudicated. Honorable Speaker, in my own county where I come from, Elgeyo Marakwet County, in particular my constituency, is that we have land that has not been demarcated, land that has not been adjudicated, and Honorable Speaker, we have no titles in those particular areas. We have faced challenges. For example, under the CDF, we are advised that you cannot allocate money to purchase land if there is no, we do not have, if that area is not, that school has no title deed. So we've had challenges in addressing such critical areas. And Mr. Speaker, I agree absolutely with you that in as much as we have this kind of legislation that purports to provide for property rates, we will experience the challenges in areas that has not been adjudicated. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we call upon the Committee of Lands, and the Vice Chair is here, to fast-track matters to do with land adjudication in this country and be able to issue titling. In fact, Honorable Speaker, where I come from, I have argued that the biggest challenge that we have on matters to do with conflict, armed conflict in our region, is because there is no absolutism in terms of ownership of property. So that land is communal, but the same is also not registered under the Community Land Act. So that if land was registered under the CLA, the Community Land Act, then it could provide some form of ownership. Mr. Speaker, I've argued that if the government is intentional in providing permanent solution to the issue of conflict, then one of the issues is to provide absolutism in terms of ownership of property, so that each person has a title of ownership of property. And an individual would be protective to his parcel of land in case of any attacks. And even it could be able to assist those people if they want to acquire securities. They use securities to get maybe loans in banks. So, Mr. Speaker, I also call upon the committee so that, because even if we pass this particular legislation in this House, and I pray that it passes because it's a good law, then this law will not be applicable to areas that have not been adjudicated, to areas that do not have title deeds. And I think that is the biggest weakness when it comes to the application of that law, because it means, because, Honorable Speaker, almost 60% of this country, 60% of the owners of land in this country have land that do not have, they are in possession, but they do not have ownership. They just demarcate and say this is our land, but they do not have the title of ownership. And this means that this law will apply to a section of this country and not the entire country as envisaged by this particular legislation. And I think that is a weakness that we must be able to address. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, you've raised a very fundamental issue. Article 191 talks about the issue of county governments making law. Honorable Speaker, we do not live in isolation. The boundaries created under the new Constitution 2010 is no longer new. I think it's a bit old. It's 13 years in effect. Are new boundaries. Honorable Speaker, these new boundaries separated communities that enjoyed certain cultural practices, certain rights,
said that a particular county may pass a legislation that is offensive to another culture or that is offensive to another constituency. I mean, to another sub-county or another area. So, Chair, we should encourage cross-border legislations, especially on counties that share similar ideals. And I've read the standing orders of the National Assembly, which provide, I mean, of the county, most of the county governments, county assemblies, which provides of joint sittings between county assemblies of different county governments. And I encourage them to sit down and think of cross-border legislations so that we have a uniformity of legislations. Honorable Speaker, what is happening now in the county is a rush. What has been happening from 2010 to the current position is there has been a rush to make legislations to effect the fourth schedule on devolved functions. But these laws are a duplicity of other laws by the other county governments. Say that there's a lot of copy pasting by a certain county to make a law because the law provides, because the constitution provides that a function is devolved. I have given examples, Honorable Speaker. One was on liquor licensing. Different county governments have made different legislations on that subject, whereas we have the famous Mutuda law. So when it comes to interpretation by the courts of law, and these are two conflicting legislations. One is a national law that is in existence and was in existence before the coming of the county governments. Secondly, we have now county governments coming up with legislations on the same subject matter, so that when you go to court, there is a problem in terms with interpretation. And you know the law, the constitution has devolved lawmaking to county governments. So, Mr. Speaker, it is an area that we need to review. We need to relook at that issue in our constitution so that we agree that if a national government has come up with a specific legislation, then there is no need to truncate it further to provide for other provisions which offend the national law. So, Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, in my submission, my position and my opinion is this, because that matter has not been fully adjudicated. If a matter is devolved and Senate, which exists to protect the interest of the county governments, if the Senate has made or has proposed a certain bill, and that bill has been enacted procedurally as by law, and the county government makes another law on that particular subject matter, then the national law should prevail if it is a matter that has been devolved. So, Honorable Speaker, that could be my submission, because I have borrowed that, and I like the way this bill has been drafted. It is very clear under clause 7.2. Honorable Speaker, it says, county legislation shall be in compliance with this act, meaning this bill, so that even if the county government, because we cannot also deny them the power to make law because it is provided for by the Constitution. But the national law should provide a similar, the national laws made by the Senate, because they deal with the county governments, should provide a similar provision in all its legislations, so that if the county government makes a legislation that involves a devolved function, and the Senate has made a similar legislation, then this clause that the county legislation shall be in compliance with this act, meaning in terms, because it has been made by the Senate, it's a Senate bill, then, Honorable Speaker, the national law should prevail. That is my submission, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Toroitich, and I hope the committee listened to you on those two aspects. As I have said, it's always very nice to listen to you. Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi, the MP for Kwanza, and lay Cardinal Catholic Parish Parliament Branch.
At what? I didn't hear the last one. Mr. Speaker, I didn't hear the last one, but I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'm not speaking as a lawyer, and I'll speak as an ordinary Kenyan because I have experienced a lot of this conflict, and I want to thank the leader of the majority for coming up with this bill. I think in the onset, there are a few things that he has mentioned that I feel, Mr. Speaker, we should be able to talk about. First and foremost, the fair rating by the county government for uniformity, and of course, favorism is bound to be there. And I think this is something that we are now going to get rid of, so that can be able to do things that are supposed to be modern. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I also saw, and I took note of that we're going to have the dispute tribunal that is going to be set up in this bill, because currently, and we all know, that most of the disputes that we have in this country are being solved by the collection of wazee. All men sit around and look at whatever it is, and of course, the one with a heavy heart, one with some pockets, heavy pockets, my speaker, you'll find that he take the day, because what would happen is a bit of a fair representation of the issue. And therefore, I think given that we are going to have the dispute tribunal set up with this bill, I want to say that's the right thing to do. And of course, the other thing that I have noted, and I've got to agree, is that actually we have been solving the rates at which some of these cases are very many in this country. And more so, you'll find that when it comes to the judgment, I've about 5 cases in my constituency, and I don't want to talk about them here because it's not the right place, but I have had 5 cases of land dispute because I come from the Rift Valley, and that's where the whites settled. And people came in and just grabbed land, because it depends on who you know in the area. And we've had cases like that, and today I'm having cases, 5 cases. I don't know what to do, because if I now let the county government sort out the dispute, Mr. Speaker, that will not be done properly. It will be favored. So that again is something that I think you being a lawyer, and my friend here who has just spoken, being a lawyer, you know that. I think the way we are going is good, and of course, again, whatever we are going to set up would be evaluated after 5 years. Somebody say that it's going to be very expensive, but I think we have to move with the time, because things keep on changing. As they change, because we got to see what is not working, and therefore I quite agree that whatever you have put in this bill, that you will have evaluation of whatever we have put up after every 5 years. Mr. Speaker, I quite agree, because we are in dynamic position and everything else keep on changing. And lastly and not least, the fact that this bill has also gone through public participation. I think there's a lot of input from the public, because the wearer of the shoe knows exactly where it pinches. So the fact that it's actually been, we have had public participation on the same thing, I want to agree, because these are people who are learned. I've seen about 5 lawyers in the same, and therefore we'll be able to look at it, and therefore not to worry about what will happen. The third reading of this bill will be able to then come in with amendments and some inputs that will be able to assist, because I'm seeing it the first time. I'm not a member of the committee, but I can see that there will be quite a number of things that will be able to change in the third reading. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, without wasting so much of the time and repeating myself and repeating what other people have said, I think in all fairness, we, I think, should be able to pass this bill as it is and then be able to have some amendment in the third reading. I support.
Honorable Wanyonyi, Honorable Mwenje. Did Honorable Mwenje leave? Let me search for Honorable Amos Mwago. You want to speak to this?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this very crucial motion. And I start by stating that I support the bill on valuation and rating of properties. Mr. Speaker, you understand that the issue of land is very emotive in this country, and it has come a time when we have to address it once and for all. We have to move with speed and catch up with other countries in matters reforms on lands. By doing so, I think the first thing we would have to do is we would have to fully digitize the whole issue of land in this country, so that at least we can be able to eradicate or reduce problems that emanate from land-related issues. We are seeing so many challenges with the conflict, areas in conflicts because of land, the issue of the coastal people, the issue of historical land injustices, the issues that now are coming out in these other areas where people are claiming, people are invading their communal lands, the pastoral lands that are there in the northeastern Kenyan and all the other areas. I think it is time now we fully digitize this land issue first, so that even when we want to do valuation, revaluation and this rating, we can be able to capture a broader bracket. Because right now, even if we are to do this valuation, we'll address only the people who have been perennially addressed by this rating. But I think in addressing the issue of collecting more revenue, I think it is only better that we try to do, as the honorable member has alluded, we try to fully get the absoluteness of ownership of land in this country. Even if you're not able to do it absolutely, but we can get at least a higher percentage that we can capture in the rating bracket. Also, my second issue on that, I think if we are to get this land fully digitized so that even people can access ownership anywhere in this country or even in other countries, those people who are in the diaspora who have invested in land in this country, we can even reduce the cases of land grabbing in our counties. Because with the openness that digitization has brought, you're able to access and know the status of your land anywhere you are. And I think that's the first step in the right direction. And we have seen these foreign companies have come to Kenya and mapped this Kenya. Like these companies that have offered these services of maps in our phones, you are able to trace a place, you're able to know how many kilometers from Kericho to Nairobi, you're able to trace a road, even the shortest of a road in the deepest of a ward, you're able to trace it. So it's only fair that the government invests resources in digitizing this matter, and it is possible, it is doable. As we have seen with Google Maps, as we have seen with other technology companies, they're able to trace things even in our villages, and they're not here in Kenya. So if the government invested more in digitizing this issue of land, I think you deal with that issue once and for all. My second issue, I seem not to agree with Majority Leader when he says that a higher story building will be charged more than the one that is being used for parking. I'm not a land economist, but I know for my county, I want to stimulate and incentivize investment. If I encourage the person that has a parking in the Nairobi city center, and that area can be developed and create more employment and more opportunities for our people by making him not pay, making him pay lower rates than the one that has a story building, I don't think we are attracting investment in this county. Because you need to understand, again, this person who has built a multi-story building is also caught in the rental income tax bracket. So it's actually a more contributor to the revenue of this country on a higher level than the person who, in actual sense, the person who has that open space should be the one who's been charged more so that they can be encouraged to bring investment and develop that area instead of having that land lying down. The other challenge, I think we have a challenge of the informal settlements. As my learned friend there, the lawyer, was saying about absoluteness in possession of land, I was wondering how these people in the informal settlements can get titles and start maybe paying rates. But also when you want them to pay rates, at what, you'll find an informal settlement in the middle of a very, let me say, a very expensive area. You'll find it in the middle of maybe a very posh estate. The value of land remains the same because the locality is the same. But the capability to pay of this person living in an informal settlement, they cannot be able to pay as that person living in that posh neighborhood. So I think they need to look some of those issues, because we don't like to have a situation that will be unfair to other people. The other issue that is of concern to me, even if we seek to collect more revenue for county governments, they also have to be accountable and they also have to be creative. We have a lot of land lying idle in these counties that is not being utilized, and they don't pay rates for it. Why should we go and charge that mwananchi, even if we are supposed to pay rates? They should also come up with ways of utilizing these lands and making these lands profitable, and making these lands, making sure that these lands also earn revenue for them. There are so many agencies that also in this country have been allocated lands by the government, and that land is lying idle. And we know land is a factor of production. We are saying we're an agricultural country. Why don't we maximize the use of land in this country? When we were planting maize in Galakulalu, what happened to that? There are so many other creative ways that we can improve the productivity of this country, because we have a huge land mass. As much as we want to resort to rating and taxing, maybe collecting revenue from that, the county governments also need to be more creative in the manner that the land is utilized. There are situations where you have overcrowded markets, and behind those overcrowded markets are lands that are owned by agencies like the Kenya Railway that are not being used, which could be used which could be leased to these traders, and we collect more revenue from these traders on a daily basis. But that land has been lying there. For example, the land behind Mudhurwa Market and Marikiti Market. The land is purportedly owned by railways, but there's nothing that has been going on that land. And if you go to that road, that Haile Selassie road, people are crowded up to where they are putting their wares on the road. They have actually used the half of the road to put their wares. The congestion there is on another level. We're asking the county governments to come out clearly and also support these people. This idle land that is lying around, let it be utilized fully so that people can benefit and they can also collect more revenue. Mr. Speaker, I also want to speak on the issue of fraud and land grabbing. I really want to address that issue because I have an issue. In my area of Pangani, there have been cases of where the people who had been issued with leases, some of those people maybe went back to their countries, some of them are foreigners, some of them maybe are not able to renew those leases. There are so many cartels that have come and they are harassing people so much and they are grabbing that land. And I think it is also good that even when you're doing these ratings, the valuation on rating, you check who's been paying the rates, and also the issue of titling has to go hand in hand with the issue of rates, because we are having a situation where a person decided, because the person who has a title has not been the one being paying rates. So you find a case where a person has paid rates for over 10 years and then they claim the land to be their own, whereas the real owner of the land, the one who owns the lease or the title, has not been in the knowledge that this guy has been paying. So it's a very, very big issue in my constituency, and I would like, as we purpose to reevaluate the rating, we also need to make sure our people are sensitized so that they can know about the status of their lands. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I submit.
Honorable Mwago, you are sitting. Do you have the bill?
I had read it.
Oh, you had read it?
Yeah.
Yeah, then I'm grateful for your contributions.
Thank you.
Do you have Honorable Phyllis Bartow? I stepped out. Honorable Naomi Wako, the MP for Marsabit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to add my voice to this very important bill on national rating, Bill National Assembly Bill number 55 of 2022. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, matters to do with land are normally very sensitive, and especially to Kenyans. It's very sensitive, and we know that many families have had issues, conflict, and people have been fighting. Others have lost their lives just because of land matters. And again, we know that land again is another gift that God has given us, because God has blessed this country with fertile land, but we are not making good use of the land, and we are not able to get enough of resources out of it. So I stand to support this, and I also know very well that Kenya's 2010 constitution is well, and it has captured very many things to do with matters land, and also suggests and also calls for complete overhaul on the matters to do with land and laws that regard matters to do with land. And so, Mr. Speaker, mine is just to say that I support because of what this bill will do, because it is according to Article 209(5) of the Constitution that confers on Parliament powers to regulate the exercise of fiscal responsibility of the county government. And the principal object of the bill is to provide legislative framework for imposition of property taxes on land and building by county government pursuant to the same article that I have quoted. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill because, number one, it consolidates the Valuation of Rating Act, and number two, again, it identifies terms used in the existing acts to provide current definition of reflecting the current practice for the valuation of rateability, and I fully support, because when we put this into implementation, then Kenyans will have uniformity, and Kenyans will also have less problem, because currently we have a lot of challenges, as I said. Mr. Speaker, our country, again, needs a lot of revenue, and especially the different counties. We have 47 counties, but only a few collect their own revenue. That can sustain or can help the counties to do some programs and develop, bring some development in their counties. And unfortunately, because we have not been collecting enough revenue, many counties have been suffering and continue suffering. So it is a way, it gives us the opportunity to weigh our own weight and see how we can create our own wealth and see how best we can give services to our people. Mr. Speaker, the bill will, when it is put into implementation or will be effected, will help people so that all the counties will have better way of collecting resources, that uniformity, and also better usage of the land that God has given each one of us. Mr. Speaker, I support, and it is my prayer that this will soon be passed and be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honorable Canon Naomi Wako. Honorable Joses Lelmengit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute on this bill. And I want to say that I support this rating bill. There is need for government to have reliable source of revenue, and this is a key principle of Kenya's devolution as provided in Article 175 of the Kenya's Constitution of Kenya. Again, the Article 209(3) empowers counties to impose property rates as a source of revenue. In the previous bill, rating bill, however, the existing legislation on rating does not provide adequate legislation to facilitate preparation of valuation rules and implementation. This rating bill, at the moment, gives guidelines and regulations that we got from public participation, international standards, so that it can give a uniform baseline for the county governments to implement. Examples on those are tabling of prepared